Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the July 17th regular meeting of the Village of Tuxedo Park Board of Trustees. Would everybody please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Yes, of course. Mayor Citrin,
Present.
Deputy Mayor Lindsay,
Present.
Trustee Shara,
Present via Zoom.
Trustee Tenari,
Present.
and Trustee Turner.
Present.
Thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. I just have a few comments. I'd like to congratulate Jeff Voss, sitting here, DPW Superintendent, who recently celebrated his 35th anniversary working for the Village of Tuxedo Park. According to Elizabeth, he started working for us on July 2nd of 1990. So congratulations, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank
Been up for a long and illustrious career with the village. And
Your summer help before that.
we look forward to your continued service. Thank you.
Thank you.
The second item is a congratulations to Stuart McGregor. First of all, for those of you who don't get the photo news, he made the front page.
Oh.
Okay. He will be giving a speech with respect to his recently published book, The Weewak Club Beach Club in Tuxedo Park, An American Story of Social Change, on July 27th at the Town of Woodbury Senior Center. I attended the lecture he gave at the Historical Society, and I found it fascinating. So if you missed that, you have a second opportunity to listen to him give a very, very interesting story of the history of the Weewak Park. And again, that's July 27th at 2 p.m. at the Woodbury Senior Center. And finally, I see we have the chair of the Weewak Park Committee here. And on her behalf, I'd like to announce that the Weewak Park Committee will be hosting a Paint a Birdhouse this Saturday. At what time, Katie?
11:30 to 1, and there is a ice cream truck from 11:30 to 12:30.
Well, that's great. An ice cream truck. That'll bring out the kids. So hopefully the weather will cooperate. I think it will, and have a wonderful event.
On the Friday, we are also hosting a dedication for Stu at the Weewak, so stay tuned.
Okay.
There'll be a bench dedication.
We'll post that announcement to all residents once it's finalized. Thank you. All right, with that being said, I'll turn to the deputy mayor. Any comments?
Well, and as liaison to the Tuxedo Town Board, I attended the Warwick Planning Board meeting last night. That board approved the seeker submission, the special use permit, and the site plan for the residential college on the former NYU research facility on Long Meadow Road, next to the Sterling Forest Visitor Center. During the public hearing process, many residents as well as the town board had raised questions about the water supply issues, the sewer treatment issues, as well as the impact on our community services, including fire, water, and ambulance. Although the site plan was approved, the applicant still needs to get permits from the County Department of Health and the DEC for their water and sewer usage. Community meetings especially being arranged by the residents that live in that area and the northern section of town. They're being formed right now to inform the public about next steps. That's it for me.
Thank you. Trustee Scherer, any comments?
Nothing from me.
Okay. Trustee Turner, any comments?
Nothing today.
Trustee Tenari, any comments?
Just one thing on, Elizabeth and I are looking at the new website and it was on the agenda, but we removed it after reviewing some bids. We didn't think any of them were cost effective and structured in a way that was good for the village. So we are revisiting some of those bids and we'll have a recommendation hopefully the next meeting, maybe the next meeting or two, but there's no rush. There's no issue with the website. It's just being phased out. So by our current service provider. So we just need a replacement.
All right. Thank you very much for that.
Thanks.
Next, we have public comment. Is there anybody in the room who would like to make some public comment to the board at this time? You'll have a second opportunity if you choose to stay till the end of the meeting. Anybody in the room have anything they want to tell us at all on any subject? Okay, how about on Zoom? Are there any members of the public on Zoom who'd like to make comment on any subject they deem to be important? I don't see any hands raised. Second call, anybody? Okay, that's fine. A couple of, we're gonna change up the agenda a little. Katie Mullins is here with her young daughter. And so, is,
New baby.
And son, yeah, there.
okay.
Yeah.
And so, I don't want you to have to stay here longer than necessary. So are you here with respect to any Weewa Park, issues that are on the agenda?
Not issues, but I believe that we are hiring an employee to help us. I think it's the last one for approval.
Sure.
And which one I'm here.
Okay. So, the Weewa Park Committee has made a recommendation to hire what they described as a beach manager, a lovely woman by the name of Hazel Christensen, a resident of the park. We have a resolution to approve that because the board has to approve any hires. Does anybody have any questions from the board with respect to Ms. Christensen, her term of service, which will be only for the summer, and the rate will be $20 an hour, and it will be weekdays only, right?
Days and special events on the weekends.
Okay, was it 6 hours a day?
4.
4 hours a day?
2 to 6 when we're the busiest.
Okay, right. Anybody else have any comment, questions for her on this? All right. Yeah, we're pleased you were able to get someone to cover because the lifeguard is alone during the week and is facing the water and really can't be expected to see what's going on in the park behind him. So I congratulate the committee in finding a candidate who will do the job, and it'll make everybody safer and make their experience at the park more pleasant. So we will vote on it. You can stick around for the vote, or you can go home with your children. Choice is yours.
It's close to bedtime, probably. Are there any questions for me about the purchase of the BWA benches or the construction of the dock?
You indicated one of them is going to be, there's going to be a plaque honoring Mr. McGregor and his family.
Yes.
Okay, and the other two, and the positions of those benches will be determined after the playground is erected, so you'll pick the appropriate locations where parents can sit and watch their children.
Yes.
Children, yeah, okay. Any questions from any of the board members about the purchase of these 3 benches, about $1,006 each?
I think we should vote on it later, but there's also one resident who may be willing to donate benches that are not new benches, but benches kind of made from hardwood. So I'll talk to Katie about that and
Yeah,
see.
I think we have a few benches that are a little rotted out.
Oh, so
we're
there's
hosting a
replacement.
Cleanup day that we're gonna sand and paint what benches we can save, and then we might do that for
Okay.
the new ones.
Okay. And then the dock that you referenced, that's the floating dock. That's not this dock, right?
Yeah, that's the floating.
Okay.
Oh, I thought that was this one. What is this one?
No, the doc in the agenda is the Vasilevsky application.
But I do think we should talk about the floating dock that we bought, because it's very rotten. I was on it over the weekend and
We should, yeah, it's
not safe.
completely rotted out.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Not today, but we should bring that up on the next one.
Well, as liaison to the Wheelock
that-
Park Committee,
Yeah,
why
can
don't you
the,
two discuss it?
can the DPW do that?
What's that?
Build the dock.
The wood top part on the floating dock is in really bad shape.
I don't know, I'd have to, I lost my carpenter, he retired, almost a year ago, but,
There's like exposed screws and kids
Oh,
jumping.
we should fix that then.
If I, may I? say-
Yes,
So we have someone with us that's actually, that all they do is build docks and floating.
Dock
docks. So-
hands, and they work on municipal docks.
well, isn't that fortuitous?
You can introduce Katie.
Yes.
Yeah, and Katie, you exchange contact
Contact.
information, and maybe he'll get a look-see at the dock ASAP and make recommendations.
The
for how to-
floats should still be good. The floats should still be good, and
Yeah.
that's the more expensive. part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys work it out. So you have a card, sir?
We'll connect.
Okay,
Yeah, so-
great.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, and have a good evening, Katie.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And the other item we're going to take out of turn because the Vasilevskis are here and I don't want them to have to wait until they're their item comes up on the agenda. Are you prepared, Mr. and Mrs. Basilewski, to discuss your application for a dock?
We are, and we have someone here to help understand or answer questions.
Okay, I think all the trustees received the Basilewski's application by email. You had a chance to look at the diagrams. There's several different options. She recently sent a photo of what she describes as a peninsula. So I will allow you to make your presentation, and then John may have some comments.
May I, this is,
I'll let them make the presentation.
yeah, but I'm just
Yeah.
gonna show you a slightly modified version. It's just an angle of the dock. And we'll explain why, but just gonna pass that around. Okay. And then I
And
think,
Bo, this is the water line, right? This stick line here?
so the brook.
This is the tuxedo.
Brook is running here and it fans out that way.
Okay.
So that's the reason for the angling as
And
opposed
this
to.
is Rifkin?
That's written.
Right now and then.
Yeah, there's like a pier, like under the water, but like above the water and then under the water.
Depending on the lake level, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so
Yeah.
is someone going to make a presentation or an explanation? I know that I looked at 4 diagrams. And I wasn't quite sure how it related to the photo of the peninsula and oh, great.
Yeah, I can give like a little explanation.
Okay, that'd be great.
But like we're,
If you would
Okay.
stand at the podium so the public can hear you, the people who are on Zoom.
all right, you guys see that?
Tricky.
Please introduce yourself and,
Michael from Dockland Services.
okay.
We build bottom docks and basically all like marine construction is all about. So,
Can you hear Josh? Okay, thank you, sorry.
yeah, so the plan here is there's a peninsula that kind of goes out that for the first probably like 5 to 10 feet is completely above the water. But then it goes under the water pretty far out there. So we're unable to just put a dock right in front there because it's only like 6 inches of water with all the rocks there. So the plan is to go out with a 4-foot wide kind of boardwalk right on top of that peninsula. And then fan out with the standard size dock and ramp that you guys have in the rules, going out on an angle to the left. And we're able to 6 by angle, and then the ramp size, which should be on it.
Oh.
And the plan is kind of, the reason why we have to avoid the rocks on Peninsula, and then on the right side is where the storm outlet is, where all the Russian water comes out and all the sediment. So can't really go on that right side there either. So it's kind of it's a weird situation to like get things, but going out and to the left is the best option.
Well, I appreciate the computerized drawing. Is that the entire portion shown in that photograph going to be removed at the end of the season, or just the dock at the end?
So it's good. The only part that won't be able to be removed is the part just on top of the peninsula. That's just kind of an idea of the wood, like pressure treated construction, what it would look like. But basically kind of a straight little walkway right at the main level of the shoreline.
Mhm.
And then from that will be hinged the ramp and then the dock.
Okay,
So
now,
Why remove it in the winter?
you can, the floating docks, I'm not sure if you guys require them, they'll probably stay in, so ice isn't too bad here, but.
well, last year we had a fully iced up lake. And a lot of people did remove their docks because you know better than me, the pressure of the ice can cause damage. The boat club had substantial damage to their docks as a result of the ice buildup.
Yeah, so normally in the securement of this, I haven't like swam in there to felt the bottom, but typically what we'll do is we'll do like 1.5 inch like galvanized pipe. Normally just 2 of them, and those just get hammered into the ground a little bit in like pipe sleeves on the dock. The other option is weights as well, depending on the ground, but everything's pretty visually appealing.
Okay, is that, so that would, if you hammer the pipes in, is that going to be a permanent structure or it gets removed with the floating dock?
You can remove them at any point, so it's not permanent. We're not driving like piles deep in the ground.
And one of the issues from my perspective was whether any portion of the dock is going to be on or abutting the neighbor's property. I don't know from looking at the photograph where the property line ends. Bo, you can feel free to answer that.
So the visual there of if you're standing from our land out looking out in the water, that's a close approximation, but it doesn't include the angling that we did in the last diagram. The reason for the angle is we spoke with the Rifkins, and in fact, They've sent a letter that John Ledwith has saying that they are fully on board with what we're doing, and what they asked us to do is to angle it such that it wouldn't prevent them to effectively egress for their canoes, because they have some steps that go down that's on the left, maybe 10 feet from our area. So by angling it, one, we allow the water not to, fan out and affect the positioning of any watercraft, let's say, it's not doing. But it also is angled enough such that it allows, on the left side, allows the boat, especially the canoes that the Richmond would have, to be able to enter freely without being obstructed.
Is any portion of the boardwalk as we see it here on the Rifkin property?
Zero. No, there's absolutely no impact on their property.
There's no encroachment on their land.
Correct.
Okay, the only encroachment, if you want to use that term loosely, is the fact that a portion of the floating dock will be abutting their property line.
In the lake.
In the lake.
In the lake and not on their
No,
property.
no,
yes.
yeah, but
And they were aware of
abutting their
that.
property line, which is defined by the shoreline, let's
Yes.
say, for this
And-
purpose.
And the Rifkins received the last copy that I just provided with you with the angling, the doc, they approved that and we're going to obviously consult them as it goes up, ideally.
Okay, well, I'm not a real estate lawyer. From my perspective, just speaking generally, you understand that any agreement based on a casual arrangement between you and your neighbors would not be enforceable should the Rifkins decide to sell and move to Florida, or wherever they decide to move. You're aware of that, right? Okay, so that was one concern that I had, which was, the new buyer comes in, maybe they come in the winter, and nobody mentions the fact that as of the summer, there's going to be a dock sort of angled onto their waterfront. But I was wondering whether you ever considered something that, if this was going to be a permanent structure, which you hopefully will use for the life of the dock, whether you would consider generating, either through a real estate attorney or some other means, something that would be attached to your title, so that would put the title company of the new buyer on notice. Oh, there's an agreement with respect to a floating dock in the summer months. Have you thought about that at all?
No, because it's not touching anything of theirs at all.
We can always move it. It's not like the boardwalk, it's just gonna be the angle. So in the case there's ever an issue, to shift it.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm not an expert in riparian rights, whether the Rifkin's property line, while it might end at the shorefront, does it extend under the water? In other words, there are rights that people have with respect to the border of their property when it meets water. I'm just raising questions. I don't have any answers.
It's a fair question.
So these are things that we don't want any problems years down the road with respect to a new purchaser. So that's my concern. Sounds like you've done a great job. You've got everything set up, but I want to make sure from our perspective, because all we do is issue the permit. You got to go to the bar with respect to the architectural nature of this. We just provide a permit, but we want to know that everybody's in accordance with respect to this particular issue of the dock, floating or otherwise, actually being adjacent to the shoreline of the neighboring property. So that's my only concern, but I'll let John take over at this point, and then the trustees can make comments.
My one concern is just the dimensions. The village code allows for a 4x5 ramp, but the area, there's no measurement here, obviously, but this appears to be a lot longer than 5
Yeah,
feet.
That's just the shortest show of the look of it. It's not,
Mhm.
Yeah, that's not the scale.
yeah, it's kind of, there's a little boardwalk on land. I can show you a picture.
Well, I'm looking at,
No, we wrapped it up recently, just because you had said that you didn't know what the visual, I think there was a concern, you didn't know what the visual would look like from land, so we wanted to show you some
So-
loose representation.
Imagine like a just level kind of boards going across and then ramp goes out from that
well,
to the floating.
as I think you can understand, the angle that you're showing me on your phone
Yeah.
is the reverse of what you're showing me on paper.
Yeah, ignore that. This is just for the look of the wood. of what finished product is.
Okay,
The most up to date will be that of like,
well, then even this one here, if we hold it in the orientation that you have,
Yeah,
you're
I
going to the
just-
left and the dock that you're on this paper is going to the right.
yeah, this was a.
Let me just
yeah.
have a short punch list of items.
Yeah.
The dimensions, we can only approve 4x5, a dock section out into the water, and then the maximum size is 10x6.
Yep.
So we're a little concerned about the dimensions. I'm fully aware that the depth of the water is not that deep, but I can't, we can't alter that at this point.
You just build like a stone patio out then?
Yeah, the other option was
Well,
either
that's,
for this part here, this blue part is on the pier. That could just be stone or it could be wood to match the dock.
well, where, this part here, I assume, is coming
So-
back in this way.
So this part is that, so basically there's a pier that goes out fairly,
I'm looking at it right there. Yeah.
it goes out a bunch. So the start of the pier is there. It goes all the way out. It's only like, you can walk out. Like I walked out in boots.
When you
20
say a pier, it's stone or is it wood?
Stone, yeah. Someone at one point built up a pier that's like,
Okay,
it goes out probably
It's
20,
rocky, but it's,
yeah.
it's.
Okay.
20, 30 feet, only like 6 inches.
well, none of us can approve the altering of the, the shoreline without a site plan and a little more detail, I'm sorry, or I can't approve, altering the shoreline. So, I think we just need a little more thought into this, and I'm also concerned that you may need a variance if the section of the code is even available to get a variance from, as far as going out into the lake, as far as you've proposed.
John, sorry, if I may, the reason why we angled it isn't just because of the Ripkins, it's also because we went out with Chris Hansen and, on his pontoon. We looked at the flow of the brook and the way that the silt deposits.
Yeah.
And so with that angle, we're able to actually get in very close. So I don't want to move, we didn't discuss this, so I don't want to move anything, I don't deviate from the ramp that is according to code.
Yeah.
Or the 6x10 dock either, like that is sufficient for us.
Mhm.
Based on that angle, we can actually get in there with the boat. That's the reason for the angling. It's not just, it also happens to accommodate the Ripkins' desire to have a free access with their canoes.
Mhm. The other item which was brought to my attention, according to the site plan that you submitted, I'm not clear where the Rifkin property is. I believe the property is in further, you can take a look. I believe the Rifkin property line is in here somewhere. Is that what it is? Because there's a line here, but is this the water line or their property
No, the
line
property line is here.
is here? And I guess, do you know what this is? It's just misleading when you look at it without actually being at the property.
That's the, I think,
Is there a
representing,
rock
I think
wall
that's the
there, or-
rock pier that's there.
Okay. I think we have to do a site visit and maybe update the site plan a little bit
Yeah,
just
that-
to make sure it works. That would be my first, suggestion. And if any of the board members have any questions, we can do a site visit.
I'm happy to join.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm happy to join, if you want, trustee.
Sure.
Matt, trustee Tenari, any thoughts on this whole process?
The new plan answered a bunch of my questions because we just saw the one with a few options, so that clarified a number of the questions. But I'm also happy to do it, that visit if that's required.
Deputy Mayor?
Yes, and
Trustee Scherer?
What's your question?
No, any comments, sir, on
No,
the application or anything you've heard from the installer? Okay. We know, at least I'm guessing, this being summer, you want to install this as quickly as possible. So we will schedule a site visit as soon as we can, where I don't know, I don't believe we can go more than 2 members of the board at a time.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we have a quorum. But I'm around, if
Yeah.
all the other trustees are
Yeah.
around, 2 and 2.
I don't need to go, it's just if you guys, if you needed a trustee.
Okay. And if necessary, even though I can't make that promise now, we can call a quick special meeting. Maybe before you have to go to the bar, and I assume that would be the first Monday in August. Was that your intention?
That is actually.
That's your intention. So, I mean, we'd like to get this done for you. But, the building inspector has certain questions that can only be answered by a site visit. So it would be inappropriate for us to take a vote tonight. And I assume the other trustees concur on that. Plus, I think, there's a notice requirement for our vote.
Yes, we would notify the neighbors, of the application.
And the neighbors would include the Rifkins and who else?
I think within 250 feet of the property line,
Okay.
so there's a few people on either side.
All right, so that'll have to be done as well. So do you have anything you want to tell us? Because the next step will be a site visit as quickly as possible. Anything you want to
So
say?
that we've already spoken with the Regnas and the Rifkins to get their approval, in verbally and in writing.
It's a formality. You have to provide notice under the law.
Of course, I just want to say thank you for accommodating us, because I know that that's not, always easy to put together, so thank you in advance for your attention.
Okay, and as I said,
We're trying to get in there in the
if we
summer.
can schedule a special meeting and get it over quick, before the time you have to go to the bar, that'll work. So at least I hope that'll work. John, you know better than me in terms of the timing. I mean, this is the 17th. If we get within a week, get everybody to look and you reach a conclusion, can we have a quick meeting and then move it on to the bar?
Yep.
Okay, so there you have it. All right.
And then, Mike, we'll be able to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, John will be in touch with you. We'll pick a date that's convenient for everyone. All right, thanks for coming. You have?
Yeah, thank you. But I don't know what's the most updated. Are these all
No,
outdated now?
we've got new stuff.
I have
now.
new stuff. I'll copy it. and
Yeah, they'll
circulate
copy
it.
it and get it to us. Okay. All right, back to the agenda. Next item is reports. Police Chief Alan Faust. Sorry to keep you waiting, but I wanted to accommodate the Vasilevskis.
Good evening. For a month of June, the police department responded to 181 calls, looking for criminal investigations. One was closed, 0 arrests, 1 property damage auto accident, issued 12 tickets, 18 warnings, 7 fire alarms and 3 regular intrusion alarms, 2 medical calls, 2 assists, 1 shots fired complaint, which was unfounded.
Okay, just tell us a little bit about that. People kind of freaked out when
I
they saw
sent, I
that.
sent an email. I think it's that normal. Yeah.
Without being specific as to the name of the complainant, somebody called and what were the circumstances surrounding? Because people actually, let me finish. People wrote to me and said, who did the police shoot at? So, you can interpret that there shots fired, the police officer fired his weapon? No. Okay, please tell us on the
There were no
record.
shots fired. It was a call from a resident that she heard a couple gunshots, which we went and looked at the area and it was unfounded.
Okay,
There was no worries.
Yeah.
We patrolled over 2,700 miles and there was approximately 815 cars, but our one gate reporting it was down a little bit, so sure that number was definitely a little higher than that. And next also, I'd like to I've asked if we could hire another part-time police officer. The Orange County Police test came up, so a couple of our younger guys are probably gonna be getting full-time jobs coming up in the near future. So I did find somebody I've known for years, a 30-year veteran of the NYPD that just retired, and Antoine Faison, who was a detective down in the NYPD, which also was a K-9 handler for Homeland Security, and he ran the Homeland Security program with the dogs at JFK Airport, was part of that whole detail. So he's got some pretty good trainings on him. He's also a firearm instructor and a couple other things. So I think he'd be a good addition to the department, help fill some of our open shifts coming up. I think that's would be like a request to hire him. And also regarding our grants, we received our grant from the county. So we had $4,999 for a couple, which is going to be used towards a couple street radar signs. So we're going to get 2 of them to put in a couple places around the village.
Will they be portable or will they be affixed?
They be fixed. I mean, they can be moved.
Sure.
A lot of times they just could, you put them where you have a speed limit sign and you could move the sign if you needed, just leave the post and the regular speed limit sign there.
Well, we only have two at the entrance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you and I talked about the possibility of putting one at the downhill slope on Westlake Road as it comes down to the club. That seems to be an area, that steep hill, past the club. Where people do speed, but we can talk about it.
Wherever the board decides with
Yeah.
that, that'd be wonderful. And also, our finalization of our grant came through from Senator Scoofus, our press grant, which, he awarded the village $50,000, which we're using towards a purchase of a police vehicle. So I'd like to thank Senator Scoofus again for, being so generous with that, and that's what really, helped the village out tremendously with our budget. I mean, he's been absolutely wonderful to us in the past in the county. So, I'm very thankful for that. And, anything else, if you have any other questions?
Sure, I think you and trustee Turner have considered a North Gate security system, and you've agreed on one that we'll talk about.
Yep.
Trustee Turner will talk about it when it comes up on the agenda. So
Yeah, that's important, just to do little upgrades to our security around the park, which a couple where our concerns are, so let's see if we can get that project going soon also.
Okay. Great, thank you. Any questions from the board members to the chief?
No.
No? Okay.
Congratulations on the grant for the car.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a couple other ones in the works too through, there's a constant work grant coming up through federal government, so I'm gonna try to put in for a couple things in that too, see what we could get. So they have one for maybe some equipment or for some full-time officers. So we'll put it in and see what we can get.
yeah, good work. Thank you so much.
Thanks so
And enjoy
much.
your new vehicle.
Thank you.
Yeah. When are you gonna get it? After it's all fitted up?
The vehicle's ready, but it'll probably take about a month for the emergency lights and the radio system to come in.
Okay,
We hope it'll be on the road within a month or so.
Awesome.
great.
Next we have our august 35-year veteran DPW superintendent.
For the past month, we've done a lot of brush cutting. I think we've pretty much touched every road now. And weed whacking, the same roads. We spent a couple days weed whacking all the village hiking trails. We've been working on a weekly basis on the stormwater mapping. We replaced a section of 12-inch drain pipe on Tower Hill Road and then blacktopped it after we fixed it. We patched potholes on Ridge Road. We worked with Nelson Tree Service on tree removals, Mountain Farm Road. We removed dead fallen trees near the main gate. Large pine tree we took out of Tuxedo Lake by the water plant. Picked up a tree on Pine Road. We also distributed tick tubes over at Weewalt Park.
Okay.
In the woods around the whole park. We repaired and installed a new shut-off on a leaking water service line at 134 East Lake Road. Finished up with the second quarter water meter readings. We worked with leak detection at 134 East Lake Road to find the leak. Installed an irrigation meter. I'm not sure who it is on Westlake Road. We also at the sewer plant, we had to pump one of the clarifier tanks down to make some repairs. We also had a motor on our air compressor at the water plant fail, so we had that replaced. And continued water, holiday weekend water and sewer operations. That's about it.
I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
The paving bid that went into the county and was opened on July 9th. Do we have any idea? I think it was Ward, but do we know how much?
They told me that Ward was the low bidder, but they were still researching the bids and they would be in touch with us.
Okay, because we'd like to start the work if we,
Oh, absolutely.
we got a lot of roads to pave. We have to prioritize that. Okay, thanks. Any questions from any of the deputy mayor?
Well, I'm just thinking, no matter what the price is, we have to do some paving this year, right? So maybe we should sit down and figure out how we want to prioritize.
Trustees,
One other thing I'd like to bring up is, I know it's not on the agenda, but I'd like the board to approve the hiring of 2 summer workers, retroactive. They started on July 7th. Mohammed Berth and Justin Membrano.
okay, could you spell the name so we can do it by resolution?
Mohammed, Mohamed, last name Berthe.
Berthe,
Yep,
okay,
and the other one is Justin,
yep,
Justin.
yep.
Membreno.
Membrano, okay. And you've always had these summer interns,
Yes.
right? This is just traditional,
They get, yeah, and they're $20 an hour.
you know? Okay. All right, great. We'll add that to the agenda. Thank you. Now, we have a guest speaker. We're gonna go out of order again. Then we have a guest speaker, AJ Reyes, who's going to address the issue of lake oxygenation. Trustee Scherer, would you like to do an introduction on that? We don't want to keep AJ here all night.
Yeah, thanks. So is Jim with us, by the way?
He's on,
Jim?
yes.
He is. I mean, I'll do a brief introduction, but it'd probably be better if Jim can chime in as well. So, over the years, we've been, as a community, fairly abusive to our lake, and that has occurred mainly as a result of fertilizers that we've been using. Again, this is going over decades, that have leached into the lake, and AJ will provide the science behind it, but we are basically, I think the technical term is that the lake is becoming anoxic. It's being deprived of oxygen. And so we're reviewing several solutions. AJ has looked at several solutions. We're still debating the best path forward. But what we wanted to have AJ do today, AJ is our lakes manager at GEI Consulting, is start to explain to the community what the issue is, why we need to fix it. And so with that, unless Jim has anything else to add, I'd hand it over to AJ.
He's talking. Can you
Professor
unmute him?
Hayes, well, hold on for a sec. We'll unmute you, or
I can ask him to unmute,
Yeah.
I can't unmute him from here.
I think you have to unmute, Professor.
I have
Okay.
nothing to say.
Okay,
You did a fine job, Josh.
Awesome.
Thank you.
all right. AJ, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Josh, for the introduction. Would I be able to share my screen? I have a short PowerPoint, if that's possible. If not, I can always talk through it.
Just give us a second, AJ. I
Sure.
think John will try and figure it out.
Add this as well, part-time police officer. Approving that.
Oh, I thought there was just one,
Where?
and it's,
No, I thought he said two.
no, he said.
AJ, try it
Okay.
now. I made,
Yep, you've been assigned a co-host. You should be able to
Oh,
do it now,
perfect.
AJ.
I think so.
Yep. Nice job, John.
All right.
Oh.
All right. Does this look good? Can everyone see this?
Yep.
All right, perfect. So once again, thank you so much for having me. As Josh mentioned, my name is AJ Reyes. I'm an aquatic ecologist and certified lake manager working for GEI Consultants. I've been working for the village since 2019 at a previous company, and then now currently at GEI Consultants. We are a large multidisciplinary engineering and ecological firm My group focused specifically on lake management and specifically work with communities to make sure that their lake resources and water resources are as usable as possible for as many different uses. So, I work currently on Tuxedo Lake, Weewa Lake, and Pond 3. We do water quality monitoring, aquatic invasive species monitoring, as well as provide advisement to the board. Today, we're going to be focusing on Tuxedo Lake and some of the history of Tuxedo Lake in terms of its water quality, the real issue that Tuxedo Lake is facing both now and in the future, and what are sort of the options to potentially deal with this issue. So today is just going to, very briefly, we're just going to talk a little bit about Tuxedo Lake water quality. We have a bunch of alternatives we're going to talk about in terms of when we identify the problem of anoxia, and we discuss that, what do we look at in terms of what we think would be relevant for the solution. Not to spoil the whole talk, but we did recommend a type of oxygenation. I'll explain what that means. And then we'll talk about logistics and potential cost. The goal here is really to educate, everybody, the community and the board on what these options are, what the problem is as well, and just give everyone a sense of what's going on in terms of what this would actually mean if Tuxedo decided to go forward with this. One thing I will say before I start the talk is I am purely a consultant. I do not sell any of these items that I recommend. I don't profit from any of them. This is purely my scientific opinion based on the years of limnological work that I've done. So this is not a sales pitch. This is not anything like that. So I'm not telling you guys anything new, but lakes are a key to all sorts of life in the park, right? Both Tuxedo, Weewa, and Pond 3. All the residents in the village use it in one way or the other, directly or indirectly. Obviously, Tuxedo Lake is the drinking water supply for the park. There's also a lot of fishing, boating, swimming, especially on Weewa and sometimes on Pond 3 as well. So the lakes and the quality of the water is integral to every single part. So investing in monitoring and understanding the water quality and understanding potential changes and emerging threats is of paramount importance to everybody that's in the park. I think I'm not telling anybody anything new. So our role at GEI is to monitor water quality in the three water quality and aquatic invasive species within the three water bodies to help preserve the ecosystem and potentially restore it if there's any issues. So I was involved in helping the village make the decision to go with switch over from using diver-assisted suction harvesting to herbicide application. We still assist with the diver harvesting in terms of helping them go different places for Eurasian water milfoil management. But really today we're going to be focusing on water quality. So we take a lot of different measurements on the lake, and in the interest of time, I won't go through every single one of those measurements. This is a graph here that I pulled from our most recent report, or our most recent annual report. Let me see if I can just shrink this here. Perfect. This graph describes total phosphorus concentrations throughout the lake throughout time. And why are we starting with total phosphorus? So in freshwater systems, freshwater lakes, ponds, rivers, phosphorus is a key nutrient for algae and plant growth. The reason why it's a key nutrient is because it's naturally very scarce. There's not much phosphorus at all in water. So small additions of phosphorus to water can lead to large increases in algae growth. And algae growth is really the sign of a lake becoming more stressed, and it's a sign that its uses are being threatened, right? So if you have a lot of algae in the lake, specifically cyanobacteria that can potentially produce toxins, you have reduced swimming, you have reduced, fisheries can be impacted by that as well. Boating can be impacted as well. Obviously drinking water. Drinking water needs to be of a certain quality, and certain toxins that can be produced by harmful algae blooms can be, will cause issues for finished drinking water. So phosphorus is kind of where most of all of this starts. Now, there are many different sources of phosphorus that enter lakes and enter, Tuxedo, Weewa, and Pond 3. There's stormwater, right? So, I know over the last week we had a large storm, I believe it was last Monday, that probably put a lot of nutrients into all three of the lakes. That's if if you ever walk outside of your property and, you either see down your driveway or near a stream, you just see like this chocolate milk flowing down, that's stormwater, and that stormwater has phosphorus in it, and that can get into the lake. On-site wastewater, I know most of the village is sewered. There are some homes with on-site water septic systems. Those systems can put in excess phosphorus as well. Waterfowl, so geese, ducks, birds in general, they can produce, they can input phosphorus. Usually it's not all that much relative to all the other sources, but it is a source we should talk about. There's also phosphorus in the natural background area. The geology, the forest has some phosphorus. It's usually really, really low, but we don't want to discount it. There's also some that comes from the atmosphere as well. The one source, though, that we don't really talk about all the time, but it is extremely important for lakes, is phosphorus can actually get recycled internally throughout the lake. And what this means is that lakes are not flow-through systems. They're not bathtubs to where you can just pull a plug, drain all the water, and you can just fill it up with fresh new water, and the lake is perfectly new. As material enters these water bodies, a lot of that material stays in the water, that it doesn't leave, and that's where you get increased sediments in the lake. You get increased leaf litter, and all that material breaks down and can add more phosphorus. So I'm showing this graph over here. This shows the yearly concentrations of phosphorus in Tuxedo Lake over time. The different colors are just different sources of data. So the green dot is the data from the CSLAP program. This is the Citizens Volunteer Program that volunteers on Tuxedo Lake take this data. And then the orange and purple points are just the points that we add at GEI, near NGEI. So as you can see, over the years, it's been pretty variable, but over the past few years, since about 2019, we have seen a small increase of phosphorus over time. And we're seeing this both in the CSLAP data and in our data as well. More important to the conversation we're having today is that we're not just seeing phosphorus increase at the surface. We're also seeing phosphorus increase at the lake bottom. And it's been high for at least since I've been sampling on the lake. So here's a snapshot of 4 years of phosphorus data. And basically each different color is a depth. And what I want you to focus on is the purple data, and purple and the blue. The purple and the blue are measurements taken at the bottom of the lake, and then a few meters off of the bottom in the deep section. As you can see, these numbers are much, 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 much higher than what's on the bottom. And for context, healthy lakes, and I'm going to go back a slide here, healthy lakes should be consistently below this 20 microgram per liter limit. That's why I have this red line here. So as you can see, for the past few years, we've been just at it or just above it. But then as you can see on the bottom,
AJ, is the 10 the ideal though? So if 20 is the limit, is the blue line on the prior one, is that the ideal amount?
Yes. Yeah. So if a lake is averaging at or below 10 micrograms per liter of phosphorus, oftentimes the lake is going to have little to no algae problems.
Great.
And we know this based on decades of limnological research where they've looked at phosphorus and algae relationships have shown. So if your lake is below 10, you're really in the clear. If you're between 10 and 20, you can have some blooms here or there, but generally you don't have sustained chronic algae problems. But then once you go over 20, that's where you start to get more consistent algae problems over time.
Got it. Thank you.
No problem. So the point of this second graph here is just to show that there's a lot of phosphorus on the bottom of the lake, and not just on the bottom, but also in some of the mid depths. If you look at that green line, even though on this graph with the scale, it's kind of on the lower end, you can see it's getting close to 1,000 micrograms per liter, in 2020. So we're seeing a lot higher phosphorus concentrations in the bottom and almost in the middle of the lake as well. So why is this happening? Why are we seeing higher phosphorus on the bottom? We're seeing higher phosphorus on the bottom because there is less dissolved oxygen at the lake bottom. So oxygen is another important parameter in lakes, and every lake has oxygen. Now, the physics of water and the chemistry of water makes oxygen less available in water than it is in the atmosphere, and less availability to replenish itself. The way lakes get oxygen is through photosynthesis of plants and also the atmosphere and wind mixing. So if you see a really windy day, that air is actually putting oxygen into the lake. However, this is only really happening at the surface. In the bottom of lakes, and especially a deep, deep lake like Tuxedo, the bottom waters are cold and dark. So there's no photosynthesis and there's no atmospheric input, right? It's isolated at the bottom. So if you've ever heard the term lake stratification, that's because in the summertime, warmer waters are more dense and they're at the surface, and you have colder waters that are warmer waters that are less dense at the surface and colder waters that are more dense at the bottom. What that does is that sort of isolates that bottom layer. And because it's dark and there's no plants growing down there, everything that's happening there is just decomposition and respiration. So animals and bacteria are just consuming organic material. So it leads to oxygen declining, and eventually you get to a point where you have no oxygen at the bottom, and that's what Josh was mentioning when he mentioned anoxic earlier in the presentation. When a lake goes anoxic, that is a really bad sign because there are a bunch of knock-on effects that happen. The main knock-on effect we're going to be talking about today, and the sort of crux of all of this, is a series of redox reactions that end up releasing phosphorus into the water. So the reason why we have that high phosphorus at the bottom is because phosphorus gets released from the sediments when the lake has no oxygen. And then that phosphorus, and especially towards the end of the season, can mix up into the water column and stimulate algae blooms. One of the ways that we quantify the amount of anoxia, right? So the severity of our oxygen loss in a lake is looking at a parameter, what's called the anoxic boundary. So the anoxic boundary is simply defined as the shallowest depth at which the lake loses oxygen. In the beginning of the season, for most lakes, oxygen loss starts at the very, very bottom and then increases it gets shallower, that anoxic boundary, over time. So as you can see here on the graph, we can see a slight trend of the more recent years having more severe oxygen loss, meaning that the anoxic boundary is shallower in our more recent years than it has been, for example, compared to 2019. Unfortunately, the CSLAP data doesn't collect dissolved oxygen, so we can't go back farther than that. So we have a little bit of a less complete record of oxygen loss than we do with phosphorus and some of the other parameters. But we have enough data to tell a good story here. Now, how does this actually translate into the whole lake? This here is a graph of the aerial extent of anoxia across the lake. So what you can think about this is all the areas that are shaded in pink are areas where the sediment is exposed to no oxygen. And what I did is I selected both time frames from early in the season and late in the season between 2023 and 2024. In previous years, we have earlier data from April and May that I could talk about as well. But as you can see, basically throughout the entire summer, for most of the years on Tuxedo, the vast majority of sediment area on the bottom has no oxygen. And what this means is that all those areas are able to release phosphorus up into the water column. So basically, during the summer, the lake is just pumping phosphorus into the lake sediments are just pumping phosphorus up into the water. And that's where sort of towards the end of the season, we start to see significant algae blooms and decreased water clarity. So what else do we see in terms of impacts of losing oxygen at the bottom? For Tuxedo Lake in particular, less trout habitat is one of the biggest concerns. So the trout that I know the village and a lot of the different residents spend a lot of money and a lot of time on in terms of creating a beautiful fishery that everyone can enjoy for trout, and I know spends a lot of money on the stockings. What the oxygen is doing, it's creating a habitat squeeze. So trout like really cool water, so about 65 degrees Fahrenheit. In terms of their optimal, they don't like to go much higher than that. And they also need about 5 milligrams per liter of oxygen. I'm not showing this data here, but basically what we see during the summer is the trout functionally have no available habitat for anywhere from a month to 2 months during the summer. Now, what this means is that they might need to go really close to the tributaries, or they're just, they're in less than optimal habitat and they start to become stressed, and that leads to them not growing as well potentially, and potentially some mortalities. So the more oxygen you lose in the lake, the less habitat you have available for trout, and that could translate to worse outcomes with fishing, right? You're catching less fish. You may need to stock more fish to compensate for that over time. The other aspect we want to talk about is nutrients, and I'm also adding metals here, right? So I spoke about phosphorus as well, but there's a series of different compounds that are coming out of the bottom. Ammonia is becoming released from sediments. Sulfur as well is becoming released. Iron and manganese, which are of particular concern to drinking water supplies, because they can cause taste and odor issues in finished water or in raw water. And we've actually started taking some iron and manganese data in some of the more recent years, and that's what these graphs are on the right-hand side. So the blue lines represent the iron and manganese values at the lake bottom, and the red lines actually represent the 8-meter depth. And we set the 8-meter depth because that's the approximate depth of the raw water intake at Tuxedo, off of the Village Boat Club. So as you can see, even though we're still below those thresholds, now that blue line is a threshold set by the EPA for secondary for taste and odor limit for iron and manganese in drinking water. So as you can see, we're not above there yet. However, we're getting very close, especially with iron. And you can see also on the bottom, these numbers are really, really high. So if you think about that data, and also in context with the shallowing anoxic boundary, we're getting to a point, so that the actual drinking water intake could be threatened by low oxygen conditions, which could lead to more iron and manganese getting in, right? So if we just go back quickly, if you looked at the anoxic boundary here, that's why I have this blue line set at 8, because this is the drinking water, the estimated drinking water intake depth. So as you can see, we're getting really, really close to this depth. So how do we deal with this problem? There are a few different ways in theory that you can deal with this, and we went through these in a lot more detail, but I'm just going to give you sort of the highlights here. Is the longer term strategy to deal with this is to keep managing in the watershed, right? The ultimate source of all this phosphorus and all this material that gets into the lake and decomposes and creates these low oxygen conditions comes from the watershed, from stormwater, from on-site wastewater, from all those different sources we spoke about before. That should 100% continue to be done. It is important that the watershed is as healthy as possible, upgrading stormwater. I know some of the stormwater mapping that's happening is really important. Being on top of on-site wastewater and sewer and stuff like that is really, really important. However, it's not really going to do anything for that oxygen problem immediately. And that goes back to what I mentioned before about lakes not being bathtubs. Lakes are accumulators. The reason why we have this oxygen problem is because of decades and decades and decades of just slow accumulation of all this material. So just fixing the watershed, even if you moved every home out of the watershed and turned it back into a forest, which it was naturally was, however long ago, it still would take decades for the lake to actually clean itself up on its own. So unfortunately, if we want to deal with this, we have to be active and we have to actually do something active, not just rely on watershed management. Once again, it is important. It's just not going to solve anything immediately. There are other options, water withdrawal. There are some lakes that actually take that poor water that's on the bottom and put it downstream, basically pull it out. Sometimes it's called hypolimnetic withdrawal. You'll hear it. It's a technique that can work, but it's got a really heavy permitting lift. And, there's a real issue with that potentially happening in Tuxedo because all of that poor quality water would be flushed directly down into Pond 3 and Weewa, which obviously would not be a good outcome. We don't want to harm the other two water bodies in the lake while trying to, improve one. So one, I don't think this would likely be permitted by DEC, and two, we would have some pretty significant impacts to our other water resources. There is also another technique called water circulation, basically where they put bubblers in the bottom of the lake, and that's functionally the way you can think about them. So if you've seen aquarium tank and they have those little stones that sit on the bottom and bubble air up into the top, think about that, but just on a much larger scale. So you put these distributed all throughout the lakes, and it pushes the bubbles all the way to the top. What that does is the bubbles themselves are not adding the oxygen. What you're doing is you're actually physically mixing the lake with the force of the bubbles. So you get what you get basically a homogenized condition. So the top water is the same as the bottom, and the lake is just mixing up and down. The concept there is that some algae do not like to be mixed, and especially the cyanobacteria. So sometimes you see a reduction in the amount of cyanobacteria when you do that. However, the largest drawback, and especially for tuxedo, is you would completely eliminate the habitat for trout. Trout would basically not be able to live in a lake that's completely circulated because the temperature is now the same at the surface and at the bottom. So even if you increased oxygen all the way, you're going to have, 70 degrees, 75 degrees in the summer throughout the entire lake. So trout populations just cannot really survive with water circulation. And then the last technique that comes up all the time is something called nutrient inactivation. There's many other states that allow either aluminum, it's either aluminum sulfate, aluminum chloride, basically aluminum salt, to be put into a lake. And what that does is that aluminum binds phosphorus, and that bind is insoluble. It will never come out of that bind. I kind of skipped over this before, but the reason why phosphorus comes out of the bottom when we deal with oxygen in lakes is because it's bound to iron. And when there's no oxygen on the bottom of the lake, the iron and phosphorus bond breaks, and then the phosphorus can go up. The alum iron phosphorus bond does not break. So it's a really attractive solution for a lot of different lakes. It's been used successfully for many, many years and decades. We've learned a lot about alum. There's also other nutrient inactivants. The problem is that currently in New York State, there is no permitting pathway for it, and it is not allowed. That's a larger conversation. I'm more than happy to go into that, but for our purposes, it's just not something that's on the table. So, what is our recommendation for tuxedo? If we want to manage this anoxic problem in the lake, I believe the best step for Tuxedo Lake is to do something called hypolimnetic oxygenation. And basically what this comes down to is putting highly concentrated dissolved oxygen into the deep waters to functionally blanket the bottom and prevent nutrient release and increase fish habitat. So what this technique is doing is there are lines that would be put out into the lake that originate from a onshore oxygen generator. And this oxygen generator would basically pull in water and supersaturate that water with dissolved oxygen and release that water into the bottom of the lake. And that water, because you're pulling the water from the cool bottom of the lake, it is cool still, and it will spread laterally across the bottom. These systems can spread sometimes close to 1,000 feet, even more, from the end of one diffuser head. So it gets a nice coverage of the bottom. And also the bubbles that are produced from, if you see on this figure here, the bubbles that are produced are so small and so fine, they don't actually mix the water and they don't interfere with the temperature regime. So the question about, the reason why we didn't think that water circulation was going to be a good idea in terms of impacting the trout habitat, this is not a concern here because the bubbles do not have enough force to actually create that difference. And this particular type of hypolimnetic oxygenation is called bubble line diffuser oxygenation. There's other types. There's Spiess cones. There's oxygen saturation, where they actually put a tank under the water and they create oxygen that way. There's a few different ways to do it. We actually think that the depth of tuxedo is an ally for this because because the lake is so deep, those bubbles can't affect the stratification. Shallower lakes would not be a candidate for, but a deeper lake like Tuxedo definitely would. One thing I'll mention too is that there's a lot of science behind this. This has been done for many, many years in drinking water supplies. This is a very popular technique, especially out in the Midwest and the Western states. They have these large drinking water reservoirs that have severe anoxic conditions, and they're trying to deal with iron and manganese and also other issues like methylmercury production. So this type of technique has been shown in the peer-reviewed literature to be successful at increasing the oxygen at the lake bottom. And there's also been a few other studies looking at impacts on fish and shown that fish growth rates have increased, fish habitat has increased as well. So this does have a relatively good track record of working well for a lot of these drinking water supplies. Just get rid of that. So this is just a quick picture of the line that it's out there. As you see, there's the yellow line that holds the oxygen in it, and then you have that black line. And basically, what that black line does is you can fill that with water or air and float the line up to the surface, and that's how the groups do maintenance on that particular line. Just in case anything happens. And then over here, and I'm kind of running through a lot of this pretty quickly, but the one thing that would have to happen is there would have to be some sort of an area, like a storehouse made for the oxygen generation. So the oxygen generation is done by a pressure swing absorption a generator. And usually you need some sort of a storehouse or a area to house these compressors, and then obviously with enough ventilation to be able to execute that. One of the biggest ways that oxygenation projects fail is because they put them in an area that doesn't have enough ventilation, and then that creates issues in terms of overheating. So that would be a consideration to potentially this system. So the last slide I have here is about costing. So what we did is that when we identified that we thought that this was a good candidate for Tuxedo, we reached out to a company called Clarity RG, who the principal is Paul Ganser, and he specializes in these types of hypolimitic oxygenation systems. And we asked him to see if he can give us a price for this and kind of break down what the capital costs would be, the electrical costs, and preventative care, just to give the village an idea of what this would potentially cost. And no secret, these systems are expensive. There's a reason why drinking water supplies are some of the only ones that really can use them, because they have the capital to be able to do this. Doing these hypolimitic oxygenation systems, they're not really only recently have they become potentially available for very small ponds and lakes. Tuxedo I wouldn't consider to be a small lake, but on the drinking water supply, it is a relatively smaller reservoir. So what Paul thought the price would be, and these are sort of ballpark prices, is a capital cost of about $550,000, which would cover the construction of the material and actually installing it and everything. This doesn't include any site prep, excavation, permitting, some of the other ancillary costs that could be associated with this. And then there is an electrical cost of $668,000, but this is spread over 10 years. This is an expected over 10-year operational cost. So, you can think about $68,000 a year in electrical. And this does vary based on the amount that the oxygenation system is used. With these systems, you don't always have to have them on all the time. It really depends. Sometimes you can run them just during the summer. Sometimes you can run them for short intermediate bursts. We'd have to do a little bit more figuring out, a little more calculations, and maybe a little more trialing to figure out what that would be. But that's generally how the electrical cost would be for something like this. And then there is some preventative care. Compared to the capital and operating cost, it's not really that much, $30,000 once every 10 years. And then a biannual filter maintenance on the oxygen generator. So this is a really expensive proposition. I'm not, going to sugarcoat it. I mean, this definitely is expensive. Oh, yeah.
What's the useful life of this?
As long as it's being used, as long as the maintenance is kept up indefinitely. As far as I've understanding from Paul Ganser at Clarity, as long as that we can do the preventative measurements, it should be good for the life of the program. Obviously that doesn't count if something unexpected happens with the generator system or something else that is kind of unforeseen. But the way that Paul's explained it is it's pretty much going to be good for the entire realm. Obviously the biggest thing is servicing those lines, because sometimes those lines get biofouled and they're not maybe putting out enough oxygen, they become less efficient, so you have to go down and clean them. Luckily, because you can float them to the surface, that's not really that big of a deal. Other systems, you actually have to send divers down to do it. This one would not be like that, as far as I understand. So yeah, I think the system would have a really long life. And the last thing I'll mention before we just open it up to questions is we did identify a potential funding source through a grant. So New York State Department of Environmental Conservation has a program called the Water Quality Improvement Program, which is geared towards assisting municipalities with improving water quality within their lakes and within just general water resources. And the program only requires a 25% local match for that. So if we were to receive this grant, if the community wanted to go forward with something like this and they received this grant, we would, and if we received it, then the village is looking more at that 100,000, 120,000 range to put up instead of the 550,000, which obviously makes it a lot more palatable. So the last thing I'll leave you with is, once again, this is one option. We believe that this is, if the village wants to tackle this issue now or in the near future, we believe this is the most reasonable and permittable option to be able to deal with this issue. The oxygen problem, once again, was not formed overnight. This is something that's been happening for years and years and decades, so it's sort of snowballed into having, this sort of severe oxygen loss that what we've seen. We think that watershed management obviously should still continue. It's not to say this is the only solution. It's not the silver bullet, but it would be a really, really strong step into helping remediate the lake and make it as usable as possible for as many different uses over time. So I'll be happy to take any questions on that. And thank you.
AJ, it's Josh. That was excellent presentation. So really, really appreciate it. One question I have for you is maybe you can just talk about what you think the right timing is with respect to, applying for the grant. And if we decide as a village to move forward with the project, can you just lay out for the trustees how you think timing would play out, and when do we need to be making decisions as a village?
Yeah, so I think what we're looking at is a 2 to 3 year process for getting this money. So I think the best option would be to go for this water quality improvement grant, to really, basically have the state fund 75% of the project. The way you would go about that is the state needs a feasibility study done for this oxygenation system, which includes both the justification for it, which we've done a lot of that, and then the engineering, right? The actual specs and site specs and everything like that. Luckily, we have most of that already done. A company like Clarity RG, has a bunch of that material already done. And in our costing letter, they actually provided detailed breakdowns of some of the energy requirements. So it would not be that big of a lift for them to do that. What I've heard recently from the DEC is that they have a smaller grant for those sort of engineering planning grants, but they've stressed to me multiple times that that is like the correct pipeline to go through. So you get this smaller engineering planning grant, you complete that engineering study, and then you go for the water quality improvement grant, and then you get that grant. So we're thinking, let's say in theory, the deadline's in a few weeks, so we're not going to be able to hit that deadline for 2025, but July 2026, we would get the engineering feasibility grant. We would do that throughout 2027. Then we would apply for the funds for the WQIP in 2027 or 2028, get those funds, and then potentially, be ready to move forward in the project in late 2028, late 2029. And that, I think, is the most realistic way to get the system up and squared away. And obviously it gives the community time to have good conversations about this back and forth. Because once again, none of these steps commit you to actually putting in the system. So you have some time to talk about this, see if it's right. There's going to be some on-site engineering questions that need to be answered. So, I think this allows the community enough time to have the conversations, and we can talk a little bit more about the pros and cons and the other pressing questions. I think that would be the most realistic way to move forward.
One last question from me, and I apologize to monopolize the conversation, but we've had the issue in the past in terms of getting grants, in that we're viewed as a relatively wealthy community. And I'm just wondering if you have any concern around our ability to get these grants, or do you think that's not a part of the evaluation? And it would just be good to get that off the table. Like if we're never gonna, we should. Go ahead.
No. To be blunt, the state definitely in their scoring criteria, they definitely prioritize, disadvantaged communities, those sorts of communities to get this sort of grant, but they don't necessarily penalize wealthier, more well-off communities. That's not something that's in their scoring criteria. I think the fact that Tuxedo Lake is a drinking water supply and serves a community is a boost and is a boon and does score more points. This isn't just a recreational lake that's being used by a community. This is a, public health drinking water supply. So that does score more favorably. And then I think all the background data that we've done on Lake also is very important as well, because DEC likes to see that there is a strong justification for this being done. So I think that also will help you. So what I'll say is, you wouldn't score as highly as if, once again, you were a disadvantaged community or one of those other designations, but that does not necessarily disqualify you from these grants.
And I lied. One last question: Why can't we hit the deadline in a few weeks? Is there what would need to happen?
So I guess in theory you could, right? I wouldn't say it's a really, really heavy lift, but we would need to make sure we have the right signatures. And I haven't looked at the specific grant requirements in a little bit in terms of the administrative question. And that's always, with these grants, that's always a big, I can come up with a budget in a few days for that, and that's not a problem. But, the administrative questions I think are a little bit more. So I would say it's probably a little bit too early for that. But I think that's fine because we can still have all these other conversations that we need to have, about it, right? We can have more if the community wanted to move forward, we can have more conversations with the engineer. We can talk about what's going to happen on site. Can we use the existing water intake facility for some of this? Do we need to build something different? Like those sorts of questions that are going to have a lot of back and forth can be sort of talked about with enough time.
I'm done.
Professor Hayes, any comments?
Yes, I have a couple of questions, AJ. First of all, that was a very nice presentation. I have a question about, in your point of view, the fact that the village is now mapping its stormwater so that it ultimately can test what phosphates might be coming to the lakes via that. That should help in terms of getting the grant proposal, shouldn't it?
Yes. DEC likes to see integrated approaches, and they like to see groups dealing with their external when I say external, right, that's the watershed, everything that's coming in. They like to see that. And there's actually specific questions on the DEC grants to make sure that you are addressing those. So mapping the stormwater will definitely play in favor. And once again, it builds to the whole idea that the DEC doesn't want to give a community money if they think it's going to be a one-off or they think it's not going to be a well-earned project. And the more that the community can show that there's a holistic approach and that the community is serious about this, right? Because there's plenty of communities that get this money and projects stall and they don't get, they don't get off the ground. And that's not great for the DEC. That's not great for the client as well. The more you can show that, we're moving towards all this and we're doing everything is going to be more favorable.
So also, if we had a scientifically based riparian buffer plan for Tuxedo Lake to prevent nutrients coming in, flowing over the land, not just coming in through the stormwater, that would help too, wouldn't it?
Yes, the DEC loves those types of projects. They would definitely like to see that being done. And once again, that goes back to the holistic nature of it. It's the DEC is their position has generally been you have to deal with the watershed first before you deal with what's happening in the lake. Now, limnologically, and from my professional experience, I disagree with that a little bit because the science doesn't necessarily match up with that. But that's the way that they look at it for their grants. So it's very important to be doing that and showing that effort for them. They would really like to see that.
Okay, just a couple of other questions. Alum, I know you say the problem is New York State doesn't permit it, but I'm wondering why they don't, because it's been used all over the world. It's used in Europe, it's used in many states in this country, and I can't imagine that it isn't a lot cheaper than oxygenation. So why doesn't New York
Yes, so
State allow it?
yeah, I could talk about that for a little bit. So back in the 90s and early 2000s, alum was actually allowed in New York State. And for reasons I'm not 100% sure about, it was basically taken off the list of items that were being used. The most likely reason for that is the definition of this goes back to the definition of a pesticide. So this is really a legal question and the way the statute's written. So with DEC, the definition of a pesticide is any substance that not only kills but negatively influences the growth of another organism. So that's DEC's definition. So alum is argued to be a pesticide under DEC's regulations because when you strip the phosphorus out, you are influencing the growth of another organism. The problem is the EPA does not have that same definition. And because the EPA doesn't have that same definition, alum does not have what's called a pesticide label. Every pesticide needs to have a federal label that shows how much you need to use, the safety restrictions behind it, what are the non-target impacts, and no pesticide can be used in the state without that label. So there's sort of a legal football going back and forth where the state says, well, alum's a pesticide, where is the label? The federal government says, well, it's not a pesticide, so hence we don't have a label. So unfortunately, that sort of legal back and forth has been holding up the use of alum in New York State for at least for over a decade and even more than that. There has been some trial projects of alum used throughout the state. Unfortunately, we don't really have the reports on any of them. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening behind the scenes that honestly I'm not exactly privy to. The point is that it's not really a safety or an efficacy question. It's a legal definition question. And to your last point, Jim, alum would definitely be really, really effective at reducing the phosphorus in the lake. If we could use alum, I would definitely recommend alum maybe in tandem with the oxygenation or maybe on its own. The only downside to that with respect to Tuxedo is that alum only deals with phosphorus. You're not going to deal with the ammonia that's coming out of the bottom. You're not going to be able to deal with the iron and manganese that's coming out, potentially increasing drinking water issues. You're not going to deal with the oxygen problem where you're going to potentially, or your trout habitat's not going to naturally get better. It may indirectly get better, over time with an alum treatment, but that's not really a proven way to do that. So alum would address one big problem and it would be a good solution, but it wouldn't be sort of all encompassing as oxygenation potentially could be. So in a perfect world, I think we talk about both of them, but just with the state of where we are regulatory wise, it's just not on the table.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, trustees, any comments or questions for AJ?
No, that was a great presentation and very informative. Obviously a lot to digest and we need to solve this. So thank you.
Would we be able to get either from John or from you a printout of the presentation, or Elizabeth, hard copy?
Yeah, I could put it into a PDF and send it over.
That'd be great. Okay,
So
thank
I
you.
guess one other question, is there why not apply for the grant automatically, right? Like, why not just do that and see if we get it? Is there a lot of upfront cost or AJ? Like, what's the?
So in that way you could. The problem is the DEC likes to see those DEC approved engineering feasibility studies. And when we spoke to DEC, because we have a few other lakes that are looking at these grants, they made it abundantly clear that if you want to be very competitive for the WQIP, the larger grant, you need this DEC funded study, and this is the easiest way to do it. So in theory, we could put together all the elements of that DEC study and submit it with the WQIP, However, we'd be running the risk that, let's say, they would not accept that
Yeah.
previous study, or they have more comments, and then we sort of wasted a funding round. So the short
think
answer
that-
is yes, you
yeah.
could, but I think the better pathway is to go through that.
And how much is that? The better pathway?
So the grant award is about, I think it's for $50,000, and it's a 10% match for that gets awarded that project. So the town or the village would only have to put up $5,000. The good thing is that we already have basically all of the water quality data done.
Yeah.
And most of that report would just be getting the engineer and getting them in to do that. So it's really a small investment from the community itself on that financially. And then
Trustee
the
Chair,
next
is there
one,
any-
obviously, we would apply for the full grant.
Trustee Chair, is there any reason not to do that?
No, I think we should move forward with that. I think AJ, it might be a bit of a heavy lift, to use your terminology, but we're not committing to this oxygenation system, which is very expensive. We're just laying
Yeah.
the groundwork for it. So I'd rather move forward rapidly, if we can, and continue the dialogue and make sure the community is comfortable with proceeding down this path. I think we can do that in parallel.
Got it.
Yeah.
It's not a large upfront investment.
It's not. And this is, I mean, hopefully what's been imparted to you guys tonight and the rest of the community is like, we have a real issue here, and it's not going to fix itself, and it only gets worse every year. So we can't ignore the problem.
Yeah.
And
AJ,
the risk of ignoring the problem is one day we wake up with smelly, bad tasting water, and we're all going to be, put out on to the firing squad.
Yep.
AJ, will the feasibility study give us kind of tangible benefits that can be quantified? Like, will we know what the impact is, or do we just expect it to be
Yeah,
a
so
positive impact?
the feasibility study will definitely get at that. We wrote an initial costing letter that was submitted to the trustees that did talk about a little bit more of those feasibility or the tangible benefits in terms of what we can tangibly expect from oxygenation in terms of fish habitat, all those other items that would be expanded upon. I think really the biggest question though, and what the feasibility study is going to answer, is those site specific questions, right? The only place where this system I think can realistically be put, unless a private homeowner is willing to, allow a portion of their property to be used, would be the Village Boat Club, just with the space. So I think that is going to be I would foresee that being the biggest hurdle to all of this in terms of, making sure we have the system. So actually my recommended next step outside of the grant process would be to bring in Paul at Clarity RG to have him speak, and maybe have John and Jeff be very active participants in that, just so we can kind of talk through some of these more, these kind of in the weeds logistical questions that are going to be, I think, paramount to this. I mean, that is such a big crux of the success of this. Obviously, one is the science of getting the oxygen down there, but we have to be able to put it there, and we have to make sure that that system is going to be put in a place where it can, be easily serviced and those sorts of things.
What is the deadline for the DEC grant? Is it part of the consolidated funding?
I believe it is, and I believe it's the 31st of this month.
Mr. and Mrs. Vasilevsky, you had a comment on this?
I was just wondering how many of these you've done locally around us, AJ?
Yeah, so these particular systems, especially for smaller lakes, are relatively new. There's only a few of them in the Northeast, partially because they finally come up with the technology to make it on a smaller scale for smaller lakes. There's a lake in New Jersey, Culver Lake, which is 500 acres, so a little bit bigger than Tuxedo, that has done this system, and they've done it successfully. There's a smaller one in Massachusetts that has done it. We've personally at GEI worked on designing a system out in California. We're helping design when we're on the alternative analysis end of this. So there's not many of them that have been done, at least locally, with lakes that are these multi-use lakes in the region. But they've been done all over the place in the West and in the Midwest and the South. In that costing letter that I provided to the um, to the trustees, there's a lot of literature on those different systems. So we have a good body of information on how they work and sort of the pros and cons. But because they're so expensive, there's not many. It's not like I have 30 lakes that do them. It's
Yeah, I was
just not
curious.
feasible for many communities to have them.
And I'm sorry, but how long does it take for the water to start changing once it goes in?
So if the system works correctly, what we should see is that pretty immediately we should have an increase in trout habitat, and we should be, at least for that first summer, if the system is working correctly. And this is the big thing with oxygenation systems, there's almost always a hiccup the first year. Every single system has this. So that should be an expectation going in. And, in that costing letter, we do talk about performance measures and what's realistic. But I would say we should see a reduction of phosphorus at the bottom of the lake relatively quickly. When that translates into, like, let's say lower Secchi disc readings and lower algae, that is a little bit more up in the air. If the system works absolutely perfectly, then you probably should expect to see that in the end of the season. But most likely, we'd want to set a performance measure of looking at over like a 3-year period and say, all right, are we seeing lower algae counts and algae data throughout over those 3 years? And if we are, then I think we can call it a success. If we're not, we might have to reevaluate what's going on with that. So that's what I would say, is that certain, like, the trout habitat would be pretty immediate. Some of the other, like the iron and manganese, will be very immediate. The phosphorus reduction should be immediate, but that sort of next level effect of reducing the algae, that might be a little bit longer time.
AJ, last question for me. Would this help the algae in the other 2 lakes, or would it just be specific to the big lake?
So indirectly, possibly, yes. And what the mechanism would be there is that at the end of the season in Tuxedo, and really, I should say in the fall, when all that phosphorus gets mixed up into the water column in like November, that water is now entering Weewa and Pond 3, right? So if you have less algae blooms in Tuxedo and less phosphorus, in theory, during that fall season, you're going to have less, or you're going to have better water quality going into Weewa and Pond 3. But honestly, I would say that that's more of an ancillary effect, and most of the effect's going to be concentrated on Tuxedo itself. It's not going to hurt any of the 2 ponds. I can say that for certain.
Got it.
I'm sorry, I just had a question.
One more question, then we'll move on. We have to move on.
So you mentioned that the lead time is something like 2 years, right? And my question is really, how far away are we from true anoxia and lake? And is 2 years just too long a period of time to wait for a grant to come through? And then the second part of that question is, grants, at least in my experience working for nonprofits, you can't get them retroactively, although I was reading on the site that expenses that are incurred after the grant is awarded can be paid for retroactively. So maybe what I'm really asking is, if it's truly that much of a concern and we're that close to anoxia in the lake, maybe it makes sense to actually move forward, to actually fund this, and then hopefully get, some remuneration back from the DEC in the future, albeit not for the full amount.
Yeah, so what I would say is, Josh talked about this a little bit before. The anoxia problem is not going away. The oxygen loss is not going to go away on its own. However, our data currently right now does not suggest that it is such a severe current, like, this year issue that we need to sort of forego this process and immediately get it in. As I showed in the iron and manganese data, we're still below the drinking water recreational limit. We haven't reached the level where we have consistent anoxia at that drinking water intake. While we do have algae blooms that happen in the lake every once in a while, we do not have consistently poor water quality throughout the entire season. Obviously, you don't want it to get to the point where it's consistently like that, but I also can't tell you that this is something that, like, if you don't do it now, next year you're going to have a massive, massive problem. That's just not really how lakes work. It's kind of frustrating because I can't, lakes, even though sometimes the data can look linear, it's not really, you're going to have good years and bad years. So what I would say is it's not something that you need to get done like immediately, but as Josh mentioned, you're going to have to deal with it. It's not going to go away. It's not going to just magically fix itself on its own. There's just too much material that's accumulated there. So I hope that answered your question. It's sort of a middle ground between those two.
Thank you.
And then quickly, your question about the grants. Usually you should be able to, we get reimbursed. I forget how the WQIP works, so maybe not quote me on that, but you should be able to have those funds. You should be able to to get that money from those funds up until the end of the grant, and then sometimes you can get further depending on how invoices are. But usually that's something that it shouldn't be an issue, and especially for these large capital projects, it's not that. I don't think you're gonna have a problem getting that. The biggest thing with these grants is sometimes there's a delay between the award and when you actually get to contract, and then when you actually get, eligible to start the project. Sometimes that can be a lot, and that's really more on the DEC and their timeline for stuff. I have a lot of lakes that have to wait a few months to get that, right? So that is something that's sort of unavoidable, and we can do as much pushing on our end as possible, but it's just kind of the name of the game with this. So that's one thing.
Professor Hayes, do you have a final question or comment?
Yeah, I had just one final question, AJ. In the wintertime, does the lake overturn all the way to the bottom? In other words, does the anoxia go away in January or February? Or is this system going to have to run 12 months a year?
Yeah, so most years the lake does turn over, and when Jim says turn over, in the fall, when the weather gets cooler, the water temperature becomes more uniform, and when the water temperature is more uniform, the lake is all the same density, so water moves up and down and mixes left and right and such. This usually happens by December in Tuxedo. It's usually much, much later on than many other years. If you have ice cover, you get something called inverse stratification, and we don't have to go into that too much, but the lake is stratified, but you have cooler water on the top and warmer on the bottom. To your question about the oxygenation, the manufacturer and a lot of the engineers that talk about it really recommend running the system all 12 months of the year, because what you want to do is you don't want to run the system in the middle of the summer and just start it in the middle, because you have all that oxygen loss that's already happened, and the energy to kind of get back is much greater than if you never prevented it. So a lot of companies will recommend running it throughout the entire winter, but we may not need that. We might be able to get away with turning it on March. Maybe having it off from December to March. There's going to be some play in there. And that's going to be a conversation, and it's a consequential conversation, right? Because if you saw the ongoing electric cost for that, on a monthly basis, that could be, multiple thousands of dollars, right? Per the month. So that's going to be one important item to figure out. What has happened in other systems is they will start the first few years running it all throughout the year, and then they'll be able to throttle it back. Other systems, what they do is they have sensors to say that the oxygen level at the bottom has gotten to the right concentration. So once it gets to the right concentration, it turns off, and then it turns back on when it starts to dip down. So there's a lot of ways in the middle that this could be done, but that's sort of a longer conversation, with the engineer and with the company.
Okay, thank you, AJ. Before you go, we have another agenda item, the GEI Phragmites contract. And
Yes.
While you're here, would you just give us a brief rundown on what that is, and so that the trustees can understand what they'll be voting on?
Yeah, so WEWA especially, and this is kind of where most of this is focused on, has had an infestation of Phragmites, which is an invasive emergent plant, present through a lot of its shoreline areas, especially on the eastern shoreline, and throughout multiple areas. And there's also some in the western. It's kind of spread around the entire area. And the trustees wanted us to provide a proposal for control. So we provided a proposal that gives both options for an herbicide approach and a non-herbicide approach. So the herbicide approach would be using a herbicide called Imazamox, which is the trade name is Clearcast. and that's used for controlling emergent vegetation. That is one option, and then the second option would be to do a sort of hand cutting, where you would cut the Phragmites below the water line. And what that does is that drowns out the stems and can control Phragmites within the water. On land, so Phragmites both grows on the water and on land. And on land, it's a little bit more difficult for that cutting to have long-term sustained success because the plants just grow back really quickly. In the water, it's proven to be a good technique for over long-term control of the plant. So we provided a proposal and, kind of left it to the trustees to decide which way they wanted to go, with different costing options and, realistic timelines for both.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor, any questions about that?
No.
Trustee
I
Shara,
like the
any questions or comments about that? Trustee
Uh,
Tenari? What?
no.
Trustee Turner, Trustee Tenari. Ms. Cotnor, I believe that you may have been involved in this conversation. Do you have any comments while AJ is here? Any questions for AJ?
Hi, thank you. It's more of a comment in that I am opposed to using the chemicals in the water to help mitigate this or eliminate them. I'm not sure that's possible. And also, as a side note, Christopher Gow and I at one point removed the heads, the seed heads.
Tuxedo Park.
We lost your audio.
Strange.
Okay, you're back.
Okay. I'm not sure how much of that you heard. At one point, several years back, Christopher Gow and I had removed the seed heads from the plants. And I noticed just in my cove that eliminated, prevented them from coming back, close to 50%, I feel, just from my own observation. I don't know if AJ considers that an option or ever took that approach. But in brief, I just want to say I'm very opposed to using the chemicals in the water and even on the shoreline. I guess that's all I have to add.
Thank you, Ms. Cotnor. Professor Hayes, any comment while AJ is still here or questions with respect to the Phragmites issue?
Now, in terms of the proposal, AJ, it wasn't clear to me, maybe it's clear to Josh, but it wasn't clear to me exactly the cost of doing the two methods and which was more expensive. You gave a cost per year, I believe, but then it was a question of how many years each proposal.
Yeah, so I don't have the proposal directly in front of me, but I believe we did a daily cost, and both the herbicide and the cutting came out to around $5,000 per day. That's for a full day of labor for two folks to be out there. The biggest difference in cost is the herbicide can likely be done in one full day, and the cutting will likely take 2 or 3 days. From our experience, when you do the herbicide, if it's done correctly and it's applied, to every single plant and you get good coverage, you get good control in the end of year 1, and within year 2, it's mostly knocked back completely. Once again, site-specific conditions, sometimes it's 90%, 80%, but it can be very, very effective. With the cutting, you have to kind of go back and keep doing it. Our experience directly doing the cutting under the water line is, you get about 60 to 70% control if you do it correctly in year 1. And also, Elizabeth, that also is as well with, removing the seed heads. That is something that is done, especially when you're managing the Phragmites, when it is producing the seeds. You definitely want to take the seed heads off. We usually try to put them in a bag, so they're not spreading everywhere. But the Phragmites comes back pretty quickly. So we found that when you cut with the Phragmites, in order to get comparable to control as what the herbicide is, you have to spend a little bit more time doing it. So we're currently working on a project. We're in our 3rd season, and we're about 90% down, which is good. And it's a small patch, and it's really effective. Once again, it's only in the shoreline area, and we had to use another benthic mat to sort of smother a large portion of the Phragmites. So it's just, while the daily rates are the same, you're gonna have to spend more time. There's gonna be more days and more effort doing the physical removal versus the herbicide removal.
Can I add something again? Sorry to interrupt. This is Elizabeth Cotnor again. I do have the numbers that were in your proposal, and it only looked to me about so you've got the application fee for the pesticide, 200. The permit was 5760. The pesticide application was 5900. So that comes to about 12,000. The physical removal is, if you do the 3 days, that's 15. So it's not that
So-
great of a difference in
So
saving.
that,
We did that
and
seed heads.
yeah, so the permit application has to be filed for either the harvesting or the herbicide. It has to be filed for both. And this is because that permit is for the Article 24 freshwater wetlands project or program, which regulates any management of any technique within regulated freshwater wetlands, which Weewa is a regulated freshwater wetland. And that permit is more of a one-time cost, and then you can extend that permit out for about 10 years. So that $5,000, I forget, you have the exact numbers in front of you, but that is a sort of one time at the beginning of the project, no matter which technique you choose, extended out through the life of the through about 10 years. So they issue it for anywhere from 2 to 3 years from the DEC, and then you can write extension letters to get that extended out.
Hey, AJ, this isn't like milfoil where the hand harvesting's not that effective, is it? It's more effective for this, is I guess what I'm asking.
I would say it's more effective for Phragmites than it is for milfoil when you have these larger populations. But on a per acre basis, I think the herbicide is a little bit more effective. That's not to say you can't do the harvesting. You definitely can. And there have been folks that have done it and it is successful. It just is going to require more effort. And that's kind of a decision that I can't make for the village, right? That's a decision that you have to make in terms of what the group is most comfortable with. We're fine with either one. It doesn't, for us, our purposes, it doesn't really matter. But what I would say is it's the herbicide, you can get more reliable control. One thing with Phragmites, I'll just mention this, on a project we're working on right now where we're doing cutting of Phragmites, there's a relationship with the DEP of the city where the city owns the land, but the homeowners are in charge of the water management. So we're doing cutting in the water, because the city's not in charge of that, but the city wanted to use the herbicide, and the city did one herbicide application in that area, and there was basically no Phragmites regrowth for 2 years in that area, and it's currently being restored with native plants. So it's part of a larger project, and then we're still doing the cutting, right? It's not that much effort. I don't want to say it's this massive gap between the two of them, but we're still working when the herbicide costs. So when you think about the costs, the herbicide treatment, you're going to have that year 1 cost, but then usually year 2 and year 3, once again, unless something goes wrong, like there's not enough coverage on the herbicide, you're not really going to be spending much on that. But the cutting, you're going to be spending it each year, and especially with these Phragmites populations that have been there for a while, have well-established roots, it will take a little bit longer.
AJ, is there any reason not to try the pulling first?
No. I
just
mean,
an
you can
expense issue.
certainly go with the pulling first. I think it's really comes down to a question of, how much money you're willing to spend on it and how comfortable the community is with going in that way. What I'll say is, the herbicide that's being proposed is not glyphosate, right? This is a Mazamox. This is a different herbicide with a much better and more clear environmental profile. So for anyone wondering what's being used here, it's not Roundup. This is not what we're proposing. It's a completely different chemistry and a completely different product.
Proposal says glyphosate right in it, the proposal.
It does?
Sure does.
You put 2 options in there, in fairness.
Okay.
One was glyphosate and then the Mazamex. And so they were both mentioned in the proposal. And I think we made it very clear to you, AJ, that glyphosate is not something we'd want to entertain.
Yeah. And Elizabeth, I apologize for that. It's a consequence of me not having it in front of me. So glyphosate is one of the industry standards for controlling Phragmites, but it is not the only one. Right. So, I mean, I think you could use a Mazamox and you'd be perfectly fine with it. Us putting glyphosate in there is not us recommending that is the way that the village should use, but we wanted to put it in there for interest of being complete. But once again, I apologize for that. I should have been more clear.
Well, it does say that you recommend they be used in combination, but either can be used alone.
Yeah.
That's
Because
what-
in the industry standard, you use both in combination. That's because imazamox and glyphosate have slightly different modes of action, so they're more effective together. But you're clear to use either or. And in this situation, I think using imazamox would be my recommendation, obviously based on the community sensitivity to that. If the community wants to go through with an herbicide approach.
AJ, to prevent these from coming back, do we also need a plan to plant native plants to displace the Phragmites?
I would highly recommend that. We didn't include that in our proposal, but I think that would be a really smart idea, especially for the plants on the land. In that example, I mentioned that we were kind of working together with the DEP. The community and DEP hired a landscape architect to design a planting plan and planted a whole series of both upland and wetland vegetation in those areas. And I think that's a really good idea because Phragmites is not just that it's hard to control, is that it can be spread very easily, through just traffic from cars, right? The seeds get on cars, they get moved around. That's why when you're driving on roadways, you see it everywhere on the roads. So I would highly suggest coming up with some sort of a restoration plan for each of these areas. And this could be a partnership between the individual homeowners, or it can be led by, the village itself. And either if you decide to use an herbicide approach or if you decide to use the hand cutting approach, I think restoration in both scenarios is warranted.
Josh, I don't have the budget handy. Do you recall, did we put anything like this in the budget?
I don't think we did specifically for Phragmites.
Yeah. So what would if we wait till next year and put it in the budget? I mean, what do you think?
I mean, that's a question for AJ. I think this is not like milfoil, right, which took over our lakes. I don't know, AJ. I don't know how you feel about it. I don't feel like it's.
Yeah, I can talk to that a little bit. So based on my observations of Phragmites on Weewa especially, and Elizabeth, feel free to chime in here as well, is while it's in a lot of places, I would not characterize it as exploding across the shoreline.
Right.
It's there are certain places where it's definitely been, established for a while and it is thick in those areas, but this isn't something that's exponentially getting more and more and more and more larger. And in reality, even if it expands, what you're functionally looking at is, let's say, an extra day of
right,
potential herbicide application, or maybe an extra day or two of cutting. Obviously, you don't want it to explode where it's covering the entire shoreline. But based on at least what I've seen, I don't think it's growing as fast and as aggressively
This
as
is not
milfoil.
an emergency. We do have real emergencies. This is not a real emergency. I mean, I think this can wait. Michelle is a short answer.
I think that's what we should do.
Okay, by the way, AJ, what's the appropriate time of year to do the eradication, if I can use that? Summer? Spring?
So if you're cutting if you're using the cutting technique below the water line, you want to do it around summer because the plant is allocating most of its energy to growth. So that could be a very effective way to cut it in, your June, July, August timeframe. For the herbicide, you actually want to do it later on in the season because the herbicide, later on in the season, the plant is moving a bunch of its energy down towards its roots. So you want to take advantage of that natural biology so the herbicide can be translocated down into those lower areas. I'd have to check more specifically on imazamox, but that's usually the way that glyphosate works with these herbicides. But for cutting, you could do it most of the time throughout the year. In our project that we're working on, we do it early May cutting, and then we do an October cutting as well. That seems to work for us, but I think the cutting is a little bit more flexible during the times of the year. I would recommend cutting plants before they maybe form the seed heads, because then the seed heads become a little bit more difficult to wrangle. You have to kind of make sure you cut the seed heads off and put them in a bag. But there's some flexibility there.
Ms. Cotton, our last question or comment.
Yeah,
Moving on.
I do. I have a question. How far below the surface do you cut the plant? And is this something an individual can do?
So we try to cut the plant as close to the sediment as possible. Obviously certain site areas, it's harder to do that. We kind of learned the hard way the first time we did this cutting where we only cut it about 6 to 8 inches and we didn't get nearly as much as control as we thought. So we try to cut it as low as possible. And yes, an individual could 100% do it. There's nothing, overall special about that. When we get the permit to do this work, it doesn't designate that a professional needs to do it. Obviously, professionals have advantages to doing that in terms of,
AJ, so you don't need
work or anything like
divers.
that.
It's not like milfoil where you need.
Yeah, no.
It's on the shoreline.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
it's not divers. I mean, what you would want is, you'd obviously want the DPW to maybe supply like a dump truck.
yeah.
So you can put the material right into there and kind of move that off site. But Elizabeth, to your point, yeah, I mean, individual homeowners can definitely do it. The one thing we learned about cutting though is if the water levels in the winter are higher, you get better control, or if they're higher just throughout the season, you get better control versus if the water levels are lower, because you have longer time for those plants to be drowned out. So that was something we learned in our cutting projects is, keeping those water levels high for a sufficient amount of time helps with overall control.
It sounds like we're wrapping up lakes, which is great. It's been a great session. AJ, when you send the PDF of the presentation, can you also resend to Elizabeth for distribution to the trustees your original oxygenation proposal? Particularly since we have a new trustee with us.
Oh, definitely.
Okay, thank you, AJ.
AJ, amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
All right,
appreciate
thank you so much, everyone.
appreciate your time on this. All
Thank
right,
you.
getting back to the agenda, the next item is John's building department and land use report.
We have a number of projects that are in progress that are well underway and moving ahead well. But we also have a handful of violations that I'm working with the attorney on, some of which we're actively moving on during court. We do have a tentative site visit at the Hugh property next Wednesday to look at the work that was done without a permit, including the tree.
Talking about the lakefront property,
Yes.
not her house.
Correct. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Water department reports are attached to the record. Treasurer reports are attached to the record. So my first motion tonight is I make the following motion. Be it resolved that the board add all written reports to the permanent record. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second by trustee Tenari. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Next we
Aye.
move on to the June Board of Trustees meeting minutes. Be it resolved that the Board of Trustees approve the minutes from the regular Board of Trustees meeting on June 18th, 2025. I make that motion. Do I have a second? Trustee Tenari was not present, so anybody else?
Second.
Second by trustee Turner. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next is the July reorganization meeting. Be it resolved that the Board of Trustees approve the minutes from the 2025 reorganization meeting held on July 7th. Do I have a second?
Aye.
Second by trustee Turner. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So 4-0, 4-0, 5-0, sorry. That was 4-0, 5-0, and 5-0. Okay. We took care of the lakes issues. So the next item on the agenda is the Tuxedo Ambulance Corps contract. I met together with trustee Tenari, the president of the ambulance corps, John Kilduff, and one of the other officers, Ed Mattis. I don't know his position. We discussed the contract that we've been talking about for several meetings. And what it essentially came down to is they expressed their gratitude for any contribution we could make through a contract for services. So I'd open the floor to discussion about that. Does anybody have any thoughts about the amount of funds we would provide to the Tuxedo Volunteer Ambulance Corps? I would suggest they asked for $53,000 per year. I think that's a little excessive. I went over some, Matt and I, trustee Tenari and I went over some of the items. And from my perspective, I think $25,000 a year from the village would be suitable. So I'll open it up for discussion.
So I think it's for a good cause. I guess, Michelle, the question is, do we have it in the budget?
That's the question.
Yeah.
How do we do that? Do we just do a budget modification that, I take it out of, I'm not sure how we just take it out of our reserves without it being budgeted.
And to be clear, this is not for a good cause. This is for services that we're receiving as a village. This is,
Yeah, everybody had a copy of the contract. So the question is, are we prepared to sign a contract? And if we are, what's the annual a fair amount of money that we should pay to the ambulance corps to provide the services which are delineated in the contract drafted by Harris Beach?
So I'm comfortable with the number. It's just how
we do it.
How we fund it.
Okay.
I mean, I could ask Andrew how we would do that.
I mean, what we could do is just do a budget modification. That's what we'll
Right.
do later in the meeting for the for that the bridge payment, because we didn't budget for that, and that was very, very high. So later in the meeting, we're gonna have a budget modification to pay for that, so we could just include this with that.
Okay,
We certainly have the money in reserve to pay for it. That's not
we
a
do.
problem.
Yeah, there's no question about that.
But I mean, the reserves are also, I mean, it's a slippery slope if we start using our reserves, right?
Yeah, I wish we could have budgeted for it.
I guess that raises a good question is, should we wait till the next budget cycle to start this?
That's what I'm wondering. What do you think they could? I would
I'm not-
prefer that, but
The ambulance corps has been telling people that they're in dire
It's
straits.
fairly acute.
Matt was there, Trustee Tenari was there with me. I know that Ms. Bozaleski has volunteered to host or at least sponsor some sort of fundraiser to assist them. But they indicated to us that, they really are short on cash, and they are telling, they didn't tell us, but residents have called me up and asked me if the ambulance corps is closing. So there may have been some rumor, maybe, I don't know who circulated the rumor that their financial situation is so bad they may go out of business, but I can't say who started that rumor. So
and 25, would that help? I mean,
we can.
the other 25?
Okay. What
I
time
mean-
is that open until?
Josh, you're on speaker.
Sorry, guys.
That's okay.
So, I mean, would it help? Yes, they essentially said anything,
Everything helps.
anything would help.
Okay.
I
So it'd
mean,
be a one-time reserve spend this year and then next year would come out of
Full
our normal budget.
Yeah.
I'm fine with
Okay.
that.
I
Okay,
think the one thing I would want to say for the record is, besides what we're talking about, the services, there's nothing in the tax roll for the ambulance corps. I know I was surprised by that. I think a lot of
Well, no,
residents
We pay the
assume
town and the town pays
the town pays for the CPR,
they pay for the
paramedic,
paramedics. Yeah.
Paramedic,
yeah.
it's
not
about
for the actual ambulance
950,000 a
corps.
year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they pay for the 24-hour
Yeah.
paramedic, but I think as a resident, I assumed
Yeah.
the ambulance corps was included, but it's not. So I
They
think
have to become a
awareness is important.
district, and Todd said that it's difficult to become a district. I don't know. I mean, if they were a district, then like the library
And the fire,
and the fire,
right? There'd be a
They-
taxing authority.
yeah, it's a taxing authority. So they really should, maybe we should kind of really push, encourage them
Okay.
to become a district.
I think they agreed in response to the proposed contract for services, which was authored by Harris Beach, that they're in favor of becoming a district. Whether they're gonna take any action in that direction is not a question, not an issue we discussed with them.
Yeah, instead it would be town-wide tax levy.
That's right.
So, they could raise enough money.
But they need money now, so
Okay, all right.
are we agreed?
Yeah, we'll
take it
do a
out of-
budget
Take
mod.
it out of reserve? Okay, all right, that's fine. So let me make a motion. Be it resolved that the Board of Trustees authorize the mayor to sign the proposed contract in support of the Tuxedo Volunteer Ambulance Corps for services to be rendered in the amount of $25,000 to be taken from reserve for this year only. And the contract to be reviewed by Harris Beach. They prepared it, but they'll fill in the blanks. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Trustee Turner. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Aye, okay.
Mayor, can I ask you a question? The item before this on the agenda was the GEI Consultants Phragmites contract. I'm sorry if I missed it, but I'm not sure why we didn't vote on it.
Yeah,
You didn't-
yeah, go ahead.
We're gonna table that. for
Oh,
this.
okay. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I missed it.
That we will definitely budget for.
Yeah. Yeah, we, by agreement, we
We
agreed,
can't keep.
we agreed to table
we
it.
can't-
Okay.
we gotta
Okay.
Stay under.
And I'm
Okay.
sorry,
some
when is
control.
it tabled until? It's
It's
like-
Next
tabled,
year.
it's tabled until we
Okay.
decide to bring it up again.
Okay, just so I know not to keep bringing it up.
Okay, all right, so that's taken care of. Now, trustee Turner, as the head of the Security and Gate Committee, has done some research on an issue of a North Gate electric fence. So let me just refresh everybody's recollection. Presently, the North Gate operates, is secured by a chain. And it's a primitive system. There's a lock on the chain. And anytime an employee wants to go in or out, they've got to unlock the lock, remove the chain, open the gates, go out and do their business. Could be going to the gas pumps at the town gas station, could be doing some other work. And then they have to come back in and hopefully they secured the gate after leaving. But it's a system that doesn't work all that well. So I turn it over to trustee Turner and he'll let
I
us
think,
know.
Mayor, you hit it nail on the head. So, the DPW goes in and out of the North Gate routinely on work days, which means that gate is open, more often than not. And, as you highlighted, it is a security issue. Because it's down the hill, I don't think I realized how much or other residents realize how much it's actually open. The chief and Jeff Voss have gotten a number of quotes. We're not looking to change the fence. We're just looking to put electric motors on it, so that if DPW, the police and others have a remote button to open and close it. We do have to run new wiring to the gate. Jeremy Kidda, myself, and we met with the police chief and Jeff Voss. They're both in favor of it. I think from a security standpoint, it's a no-brainer. We should do it. It's about $11,000 was the most reasonable quote, and it can be done rather quickly. Now that I know that gate's open, sometimes I think we should do it ASAP.
Okay.
We'll find another way.
Let me make
Get
the
that.
motion then. Be it resolved that the Board of Trustees authorize the mayor to set a contract with Precision Fence and Order, or is it Precision or is it Cooperus? I'm sorry.
Precision Fence.
Okay. Be it resolved that the Board of Trustees authorize the mayor to sign a contract with Precision Fence and Automated Gates to install an electric fence at the North Gate in the amount of $9,600. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by trustee Turner. In terms of discussion, I have only one question. On weekends, will we continue to, as extra security, to chain those gates together? I know that during the week, we want to open and close it, but Saturday and Sunday, nobody's supposed to be going through
So
those
that's a good
gates.
question. I think the only thing is that the fire department needs to have access. Like as long as they have a key, it's fine.
You know, they didn't have access before. I mean,
Apparently they do.
oh, they'd have a key?
They do, yeah.
Yeah, so they'd have a key and they'd have the buzzer.
same
So,
thing, yeah.
okay, just to provide extra security since nobody should be going through that gate on the weekends.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, great.
That's a great call out on your part, so thank you.
Okay, so all in favor? Any other discussion? I'm sorry, anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Trustee Scherer, aye?
Aye.
5-0, thank you. Okay, next item, first item of new business. I made I have a proposition that I've discussed, at least circulated with the trustees. We didn't have any discussion on it. I'm creating a code revision committee. Our code has been around for a long time, and I'm sure some parts of it are obsolete, some parts need amendment, some would actually require changes. And I think that at this point in time, it would be wonderful if we could create a code revision committee. And the way I saw it is it would consist of 5 members. I've already spoken to the distinguished Fordham law professor, Barry Hawk, and he has agreed to chair that committee. I've spoken to Jennifer Steinler Darling, who would be the second attorney with Professor Hawk. I spoke to Chu Yin Hempel, and she has some experience with the Ridgeline law, and she views the code in a certain direction, and she's agreed to be the third member. With respect to the fourth and fifth members, I don't think they should be lawyers, but I think they should be people who have a perspective on the village that maybe is a little bit different from the preservationist perspective of one member. So if we do create this committee, and we can assign them to review each section of the code. They could decide which section to start with because some are more prominent than others. And what they would do is they would make recommendations on each section, provide us with those recommendations through some sort of reporting system. And then we as the board would review publicly those recommendations to reach a conclusion whether there are any additions, deletions, or changes that should be made. And we would have a public discussion about that. And I think it's about time that we took a look at the code. I don't know if there's ever been a code revision committee. I haven't lived here long enough, but I've been here since 2015 and has been none since that time. So I think it'd be a great idea. And with respect to the two remaining positions, I would solicit nominations from the trustees and the deputy mayor, and I would open it up to the public. And then we could complete this board or this committee, give them each a copy of the code, which we have in the back room, and tell them we'd like them to work as hard as they could with no set deadline, because from the experience of the deputy mayor, just working on zoning in the
18
town was like 18 months to deal with the town zoning. And that's just one element.
But we did it, you know.
At the bottom,
you get-
Yeah, but that's still one section of the town
Yeah,
code, right?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't put any pressure on them, but I think it's a good way to review the laws and perhaps to make changes. So I open it up for discussion.
So I think that's a great idea. I think we're overdue to do that. And then Matt and I spoke to someone who we think would be good. So we're just waiting to confirm that they are amenable to it. And so we'd have to find a fifth person.
Okay, all right.
So I wonder if a good starting point might be asking the chairs of planning board, bar and ZBA, the issues that they feel keep coming back to them that would be easily resolved if the code had been changed. You know, I know that there are certain issues.
Well, we would certainly tell the chair to.
Yeah, to input, for their input.
And I'd be
And
happy.
John also.
Oh, yeah.
John, of course, John would be the advisory member of
Oh, yeah.
the committee. Yeah.
Can't do it without John.
Yeah.
But
So,
also, I really just wonder, I mean, when we went through our whole process, we used our town planner, Bonnie Franson from Nelson Pope, who had been the village planner back in the day when
we had a
we
plan.
had one. So it's so useful just to have the guidance and what other municipalities do, you know, that perspective. So I don't know if you feel that
You
that
know,
would be
the more-
worthwhile, but I mean, it makes it a lot easier.
The more cooks in this case, the better, I think, because everyone's coming from a different perspective and we want to get this done. We want it done right. So whether it's a view of an attorney or a law professor, or John, who's been here since 94
Yeah.
and had to deal with these code issues since then, or Bonnie Franson coming on towards the end of the process to evaluate those sections of or recommendations which would involve a planner. Not all of them do. I think it's a great idea, but we have to start someplace. So I think we should start with the creation of this committee. We have 3 members. We'll get another 5, and then we'll take them. We'll instruct them to begin the process. And Trustee Sherrod, do you have any comments on this proposal?
No, I think it's a great idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So anybody else want to remark, or I'll just make a motion to create? Yeah, okay. I move that the Village Board of Trustees create a code revision committee to analyze the entire village code, to come up with recommendations for additions, deletions, corrections, any changes that they believe are appropriate. That this code committee will be chaired by Professor Barry Hawk. That 2 of the members will be Jennifer Steinler Darling, an attorney, Chu Yin Hempel.
So shouldn't we vote on all 5 of the members at that right point? Why are we?
We're not gonna, they're not gonna get to work until we have all 5, but I don't see any reason why we can't appoint 3 and open it up to nominations in the future. We'll agree that they don't meet until we have 5 members. You're the corporate guy, so
Yeah,
if you.
that's not normal governance, like just.
Okay, then I'll withdraw that portion of the motion that designates the chair and 2 members. We will fill the seats of the chair and the 4 members, a committee of 5, once we have 5 individuals who've agreed to serve. But we will create the committee and we will not set any time frame. John Ledwith will be an advisor to the committee, and the committee will be authorized to work with Harris Beach, specifically Jared Cashow, who has agreed to provide formal advice as the village attorney. Do I have a second on that motion? Second by Trustee Turner. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you all. So
Question mark. Are those gonna be terms similar to the other committees, 1-year terms, or how do we think about that?
that's a permanent
Because it's
committee
gotta
until
be-
they get their work done. People may drop out for whatever reason. We fill them in, but no, they have no terms. Unlike the appointed boards, there's no requirement that we set terms of what's essentially an ad hoc committee.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
And to be clear, all they're doing is making recommendations to us. They don't have any decision-making authority.
Right.
Okay, all right. So the next item is also a discussion. There's been some, people have suggested that the planning board and the Board of Architectural Review do a great job individually. But we're in an interesting position. We have a board of 3 on the planning board where we have 2 vacancies, and we have a full architectural review board. And I think it's important, and other people do as well, that we might want to discuss the possibility, both pro and con, to consolidate into, say, a 7-member board that handles both the planning as well as the bar responsibilities. Now, the town did that, and so
I brought this.
the deputy mayor could probably enlighten us as to how that reconsolidation or that consolidation went at the town as an initial starting point in our discussion.
I just copied the change of how the people's terms.
Oh.
If you want to.
Okay.
This is 3 of them.
Yeah, all right. Oh, it's 3? Oh, okay.
But yeah, the way it works now is that the planning board, obviously, the goal was to get it 2 architectural, either architects or somebody who works, as with an architectural firm, to join the committee of 5 planning board members. That was the goal. So it has worked pretty well. The town has never really adopted design guidelines, so that's kind of been a problem. But generally speaking, the fact that the planning board has more engineers and contractors in it has helped the whole process. Because the thing that I see with the planning board is that they seem to consider projects that I think should be more discussed and determined by engineers and contractors. And so, why is the planning board not really having a lot to do except for subdivisions? And the bar has so much to do with construction. And that to me, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, we either keep the bar to be purely architectural design guidelines and the planning board to be actual construction. That would be one thing, but, or have the 7
Well,
people all together.
the 7 members, assuming we pick
Yeah.
7, they would put on different hats.
Yes.
Different times. So
Yes.
we're sitting as a planning board.
Right.
Or we're sitting as an architectural review board.
Right.
So
Well,
they,
that's true. You would have separate meetings, you think?
well, they wouldn't have to have separate meetings, but there could be an announcement in the middle
Right.
of a meeting where, okay, we're ceasing our work as planning board members. And
Mhm.
we're moving to issues or applications relating to the bar. I believe that that's the way the town handles it. When they have a long agenda, they separate the planning
Mhm.
applications from bar applications.
And most applicants have both, the construction and architectural.
Yeah.
So, it kind of all goes together.
I mean, I don't
But-
expect us to resolve this issue tonight, but it's some food for thought.
Mhm.
And the reason I bring it up now is we do have applications from various residents who'd like to join the planning board. And rather than appoint them and then disappoint them, should we
Right.
change, we consolidate, now's the time to talk about it. And, we have 8 members, 3 plus 5, and then so we'd have to remove 1 person, but it's a lot better than having to remove 3 people, including 2 who might have just been appointed.
So one comment, since this has gone out into the community that we're considering it, I've
Oh.
heard very strong opinions one way or the other. So I do think it probably warrants you like including it in your newsletter for the
Okay,
month. So
right.
people
That's a good
come
suggestion.
with their views so we can hear all of them because
Yeah,
people who have an opinion feel very strongly. on
Sure.
both sides.
And this would require a code change, which would require a public hearing.
Yeah.
It's not something we could do, we'd have to change the code if the consolidation took place, and there would be ample time for people to comment on the proposal. So, yeah, I can put it in the mayor's message by the end of that the board is considering.
Yeah.
And we'd like to hear from you. Okay?
Because
Nobody ever,
if the composition of the combined board, we get it right, then it could work really well. But
Mhm.
I think there's some, there's arguments on both sides.
okay,
I'm curious about that.
all right.
But I really do feel that the projects that each board sees just doesn't make sense to me.
Anything from trustee Scherer on this discussion? No? Okay,
No.
so we'll table it as it were. We'll continue this discussion sometime in the future. And I'll put something in my message
Oh,
about it.
also, do you want to add alternates?
Oh, alternates, yeah. It's not on the agenda. I would rather put it over to August.
Okay,
I'd rather discuss that once it's an agenda item.
okay.
I think it's something that the public should at least be aware we're considering. Okay. All right. So next item is approve the hiring of Weewha Beach manager. Actually,
We didn't-
no, we
We
didn't do
didn't
that.
actually vote.
No, we didn't do that. No. So let me make a motion. And the position, according to the Orange County Human Resources Department, is actually recreation attendant. So
Okay.
in order to put her in the proper position, I'm going to read the following resolution. Be it resolved that the Board of Trustees, at the recommendation of the Weewha Park Committee, approve the creation of a recreation attendant position, Orange County Job Title 1521, for the purpose of managing Weewha Beach, and that the board retroactively approve the hiring of Hazel Christensen on July 14th in that position at a rate of $20 an hour. And do I have a second on that motion? Second by trustee Tenari. All in favor?
Aye.
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 5-0. Okay. We now, as Elizabeth mentioned, have to make a partial payment on the Westlake Road bridge repair. And then there's a second issue of a change order. So
All right.
I'll start with the resolution with respect to the partial payment. Be it resolved that the Board of Trustees approve the partial payment in the amount of $129,423.97 to Jory Excavating for their work done on the Westlake Road bridge repair, charged to budget line 5120.4, maintenance of bridges contractual. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by the deputy mayor. Any discussion on that? John?
Yes, I would like to request one extra change order. When the engineer who designed the barriers on each side, he felt that the steel backing that was used for the timber railing coming up Tuxedo Road and the railing on the sides of the Warwick Brook Bridge was really not necessary. I impressed upon the contractor, we wanted the railings to match. I spoke to the engineer about that. He doesn't think we need the steel railings, but I think for consistency and for strength, given the remote location of this bridge, the extra $2,500 is warranted.
So that'll be a separate motion.
Yeah. That'll be a separate motion, and that change order is not included in what you're approving now.
Okay.
So,
So all in favor of the partial payment for the work done to date, again, in the amount of $129,422.97, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, 5-0. Now, second motion relating to that, authorization for change order. Be it resolved that the Board of Trustees approve a change order with respect to steel reinforcement to the guardrails on the Westlake Road Bridge in the amount of $2,500.
yes, sir.
Do I have a second? Second by Trustee Turner. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. 5-0. Great, thank you. All right, we have a couple of other motions. One, as I mentioned, or Jeff mentioned, he wants to hire 2 summer interns, or they've already been hired. I make the following motion. Be it resolved that the DPW is authorized to employ 2 summer interns by the name of Mohammed Bertha and Justin Membrano at the rate of $20 an hour. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by the Deputy Mayor.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Nope, hearing none, 5-0. Another one, as the chief said, he wants to hire a retired New York City Police Detective Antoine Faison as a part-time police officer. So I make the following motion, be it resolved that the Tuxedo Park Police Department is authorized to hire former New York City Detective Antoine Faison as a part-time police officer. Do I have a second? Second by Trustee Turner. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Another motion with respect to the benches that Katie mentioned for the WEWA. Be it resolved that the WEWA Park Committee is authorized to purchase 3 benches at the cost of $1,006 per bench for installation together with the playground. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Trustee Tenari. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0. Okay, I can go back to the pre-printed stuff. The next item is a property tax revision. Elizabeth, would you just explain to the trustees what happened with respect to the property tax bills and why this?
Sure, I'll do my best.
Okay.
We start out with the budget, and when we fill in all the items on the budget, we're left with an amount that we have to levy as property taxes. And then added into that are the unpaid water and sewer bills. And so that, well, first, the amount from the budget that, the amount that we need for property taxes is spread over the community, according to assessment value. So the higher you're assessed, the more you're taxed. And then it turned out that for some reason, there was a misfunction with the property tax program, and one bill basically printed twice. I mean, John might be able to explain it better than me. But a resident called him and said, I don't understand. I have 2 bills for exactly the same amount of money. And I don't have properties that correspond to both of them. And one of them was a property lot that apparently doesn't exist. So it was just a duplicate. So that's unfortunately what we can't collect on that because it's a duplicate. So that's almost $7,000 in property taxes that we just can't collect. At the end of the day, I am the receiver of taxes, and I reconcile the money that we've collected with what we've billed, and it should come out to be within 50 cents or so. And but this year it's going to be up by $7,000 because we're just we can't collect on this duplicate tax bill. So I just wanted to change that number, so that I can justify to the auditors why we're collecting $7,000 less. I can't just say to myself, oh, it's a duplicate, I can't, we're not going to take it. I can't make that decision. The board has to agree to it.
So Elizabeth, just question, how did this happen? And 2,
I have no idea.
I can explain. There was a lot line change several years ago on one of the Dow properties, and I didn't change the parcel number at that time. So when I changed the parcel number before the tax bills went out, it did not delete the prior number. It just maintained it. So we actually had 2 parcels, 70.22 and 70.222. And that was it.
This was a real one-off.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
So what do we do to balance the budget then? What do we have to? If we're,
You know, we've never gone
I
through this
think that's a
before,
very
but I think the issue is we don't know how balanced the budget is until next
well, I mean,
May.
just to, I mean, but we proposed a balanced budget, so.
I think we should ask our accountants.
Yeah.
What,
I
what-
honestly,
what-
if I could interject, I think that, you know, the total amount of the tax levy is about $3.7 million. This is a very small amount of money within the scheme of the whole tax bill. And I think I would just wait until more towards the end of the fiscal year to see if we even need to do anything. We may not need to do anything. It may be that some of the,
Yeah, I don't think we'll need the money. It's just, you know, because, but I'm just saying, should we amend the budget? I don't know.
no, I don't think we should amend the budget. I really don't. I would just, because I would just wait until the end of the year. And if towards the end of the year, it looks like we're gonna have a little bit of a shortfall, then we can amend the budget. But we might not. It's only $7,000 out of $3.7 million.
Yeah, no, I'm sure we'll be fine, but.
Okay, let me make this motion. Be it resolved that the Board of Trustees approve reducing the 2025-2026 property tax levy from $3,752,347.59 to $3,745,460 to reflect the removal of tax bill 295 in the amount of $6,946.99, which is a duplicate of tax bill number 296, also in the amount of $6,946.99. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by the deputy mayor. A question I have, is this the first year that it was duplicate, it was printed as a duplicate bill?
Yes, because I corrected the number this past April or May.
Oh, okay.
And in correcting it, it did not delete the.
So
the
this wasn't a
incorrect.
problem, and we won't be getting letters from them for the last, the last 5 tax years.
No, if I didn't correct the parcel number, we'd have an incorrect parcel number, but we wouldn't have any issues with the budget. So.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay.
Aye.
All right, next item on the agenda, the approval of dock in Tuxedo Lake, as we took that out of order to allow the Basileskis to make their presentation early and get home. That's been tabled to allow for a site inspection, and we'll take it up as quickly as we can after that. Audit of claims, bills for the general fund. I think those have to be signed. Matt, you have to sign those. There are 3 separate sign sheets. Anything else on that matter, Elizabeth?
I have one more.
No, nothing to report there.
Regarding the generator that the Tenaries donated to the village, the results of the bids were $4,800 from Auctions International and $3,600 from government, I forget the name of the company. I like that we have to counter this. I have proof that a new generator, with a full warranty, et cetera, is $7,000. I'd like to counter both of these offers at $7,000 to see if they'll at least come up to 7. That would pay for at least the cost of the new generator.
Sure. Any problem with, I signed all of them already. I'll give it to the deputy mayor. Yeah, okay. Okay, I don't think we have a problem with that. We don't have to act on that.
No.
Budget transfers, there are budget modifications.
So there was, if I may interrupt, the first one, there was one that I had planned for, which was to increase budget code A599 unappropriated fund balance and budget code 5120.4, which is bridges contractual, by 229,000. That's the amount for the Westlake Bridge, is it repair? So that was the one that I was going to suggest, but since we have discussed the supporting the Tuxedo Volunteer Ambulance Corps, I would add, in addition to that, to increase A599, the unappropriated fund balance, by an additional $25,000. And I think the code I would use is Public Health 4010.4, contractual for the expense.
Okay,
Makes sense.
while we're talking about that, the North Gate expenditure, is that gonna come out of mayor's salary? Can we do that? Yeah, can we take the North Gate expenditure out of the mayor's salary?
Sure, we can transfer
Yeah, do
that.
that, please. Yeah, it's $36,000 slush fund, now reduced to 25,000.
What about maybe also the $7,000 tax shortfall? Do you do the same thing?
The
I'd
mayor's
like to-
salary is 37, or whatever it is, 36.
Oh, wow, I got a raise. How about that? All right, well,
I made
let's
a
hold off,
mistake.
let's hold off.
Very
on that.
generous of you, by the way. Thank
Let's
you.
hold off on, yeah.
Very
yeah,
generous of
Okay, but the gate, I don't mind paying for the gate. I'm not so keen on tax. Okay, all right, that'd be
Well
great.
said.
All right, so that being said, we've.
So do we want to officially add that as a budget transfer? The,
Which one?
from the mayor's salary to, whatever code that will end up being? I don't know off the top of my head for the North Gate. Or do you want to just, do we get the bill? I don't know. What do you want to do?
I don't think, just take it off. I don't think we have to vote on that.
Okay,
It's on the record. Okay.
all right.
Okay.
That sounds good.
All right, that concludes the public session. Now, we move into, interestingly enough, closing comments. Any members of the public still around who'd like to speak? Seeing none, any trustee comments before we go into executive session? No trustee comments, fine.
To say something, right?
No, I.
What?
No, I-
All right, I make the following motion. Be it resolved that the Board of Trustees leave the public meeting and enter executive session at 9:36 PM to discuss the following, labor negotiations, attorney advice, with respect to real estate transactions, and possible litigation, discussion with the attorney regarding possible litigation. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by trustee Turner. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay, 5-0. You can turn off the recording. Right, yeah. All the people still there.
Just Mary Gretzer was let back in, the recording is on.
Okay, I make a motion, there are no resolutions, from, our executive session. So I make a motion, that we adjourn this meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by trustee Turner. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, everybody, have a good night.
Thank
Oh,
you.
All right.
Okay,
Meeting adjourned at 10
meeting
o'clock.
adjourned.